I am writer-director Christopher McQuarrie.
Hi, my name's Eddie Hamilton. I'm the film editor on the movie.
And this is Mission Impossible Fallout. And these are our very, very fast logos.
Yeah, I was inspired by watching another movie that ran the logos at double speed. And we got kind permission from everyone to keep the logos nice and quick because we have quite a long movie and we were thinking of any way we could to get the pace up. And so all these logos are running at about half the length they usually would.
So our thanks to everybody for contributing to that. And this scene was shot in New Zealand, a place called Milford Sound, and was one of the trickier scenes, despite the fact that there's very little editing in the scene. The scene had to be shaped. It was actually much longer. There was more dialogue.
Yeah.
And we kept noticing that despite the fact that the scene was very short, we were getting comments about the pace of the scene. And we noticed that there was certain dialogue within the scene that was vague. It implied things about earlier Mission Impossible chapters that you really had to think about. And when we took all of that dialogue out, the pace issues went away. And it was very important to me that the movie begin with a closer understanding of Ethan Hunt rather than diving into some big action scene. And this scene we cut a million different ways, as I remember.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time honing and shaping this scene. And one of the things about it that you'll notice is the use of music in this scene is constantly finessed to throttle pace. And we had originally tried something much pacier from the moment Ethan heard the door knock. The pace started. There was a quicker tempo music. And we noticed that actually led to fatigue. It created, by the time you got to the book here, you were sort of worn out. And so we went back to Lorne Balfe and we reshaped the scene to sort of play with suspense rather than tempo.
Yeah, the pace picks up when he gets the book, and then it dials down here to allow the space for the dialogue of the mission to make its way through.
And these are always these are the trickiest scenes in Mission Impossible for a lot of different reasons. The biggest being the number one enemy of pace in a film is information, and these scenes tend to be pure information. It's very difficult to make that information emotional. And the only way to really inject emotion into a scene that's pure information is the music, and we were constantly struggling with ways to bring music in that didn't fight with the dialogue. And poor Lorne Balfe had to do multiple variations of this scene until we found something that felt right. The other thing we experimented with a million different times was the voice, the actual person giving the mission briefing. We auditioned multiple male voices. We actually brought in 2 women. And it was very interesting to watch audiences react and respond to this scene based on who it was that was actually speaking. And the woman's voice tended to be almost soothing, and the scene sort of became hypnotic as opposed to getting you to lean forward. And a lot of the men who had smokier voices, which tended to put you to sleep. Male voices that were very resonant were very effective, except they weren't particularly good storytellers. And
so we ended up with Mr. McQuarrie doing the voice. After many different iterations, Chris decided to jump on board and lend us his voice.
Well, I had done it. I had recorded it right at the beginning.
That's
when
right,
we were first doing it, and we were always rewriting it and changing it. So it was just easier for me to record it. And of course, you get very self-conscious about your own voice, and so I started doing this impression of I don't know who, Bill Curtis.
Bill
Curtis on Case Files, and doing everything I could to make my voice lower and more resonant, as opposed to kind of naturally, I guess you would call my voice kind of a more smoky voice. One point we had Alec Baldwin do it.
Yeah, we did.
And Alec did an excellent reading, but again, his voice is so velvety that you tended to phase out. You weren't focusing on the information.
Plus, you were going, "Hey, it's Alec Baldwin," and you weren't listening to the information either because you were just enjoying listening to Alec's voice.
Yes, you're saying, I know this voice.
Yeah.
This scene, again, another challenge. The whole opening of this movie, the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie, is really information, because there was quite a complex story going on. There were all of these many elements that you had to introduce. And when we shot this scene, this banter between these guys was not in it because I was throttling everything as quickly as I could to get to the credits. And when Tom watched the edit of the scene for the first time, and we read the scene together, we shot the scene, we all had a great time shooting it. When Tom watched it for the first time, he said, "I feel no connection between Ethan and the team. I could feel no sense of," and what we had done inadvertently is taken that for granted. And that was our big rule for Mission Impossible. You could not assume that the audience had seen any of the previous iterations. And this is the one instance in the movie where we quite naively made that assumption. And as soon as we saw the scene cut together, we realized, oh, that doesn't work.
I'll step in quickly, Chris. Just earlier where Benji says, "Tonight, Luther, I want to be in the van." That was where in any screening with an audience, if they laughed at that line, we knew we had them invested in the film. And so that was our kind of metric of how engaged the audience were with the characters and the humor, if that line got a big laugh. So it was similar in Rogue Nation when Alec Baldwin talked about the Kremlin. He would say, "This is the Kremlin before, this is the Kremlin after." And at that point, if we got a laugh, we knew that the audience was with us.
You knew you had them.
Yeah,
and if you didn't get a laugh, you knew you were in.
We were in trouble and the scores would not be great.
The scores would be reflective.
Yeah.
This Casper is this great actor, and he actually had more of a scene with Tom. He did a 360 around Tom, and was talking about John Lark and bringing up plot in the movie. And it was actually a beautiful shot, and it got off of the axis that really bothers me, which is just straight coverage, which I'm always trying to get out of, and find myself getting locked back into. And it was unfortunately an extra minute in the scene that we simply didn't have. We were looking at the beginning of this movie, and as we were editing it together, we felt the credits just getting farther and farther and farther away.
And here we're teaching the audience about the plutonium and about the radioactivity that will come up in the third act. So we're kind of introducing them to the idea of how radioactive the plutonium cores are, because it'll be crucial later.
Yes, and in the structuring of a movie like this, especially one that runs over 2 hours, you're looking for every single second that you can cut out of the film.
Yeah,
it adds up, and that was one of the things we debated. You could have made the scene significantly shorter if you took away the explanation of the plutonium and merely showed the cores.
Yeah,
but of course, you wouldn't have it later on. And we evaluated every emotion versus information beat within it. I seem to remember.
I quite like it. Audiences quite like being educated as well. So when he says this is a beryllium rod, you get a kind of bit of a physics lesson. I think people quite like the sense that these spy movies are teaching them cool science as well. And
that was your defense all the time of that moment. You said, "I like being taught. I like the how-to."
Yeah.
You liked learning how the bombs work. And originally in one draft of the script, there was even more of an explanation. Luther explained how the bombs actually worked. Do you remember?
Yes.
And you were liking the education of knowing how an implosion device works.
Yeah. Great percussive score here that we kind of came in and out, but eventually ended up with very high energy score to just keep the momentum going through here.
And you'll remember here, little edits that we made in the scene.
Yeah.
Simon originally didn't throw the case until after they knew that Luther.
Yeah.
Simon very deliberately makes a choice. He tries to get to Ethan. They're shooting at him.
Yeah.
And he makes a choice to throw the case. And it was a really nice hero moment for Benji.
Yeah.
But then what it left us feeling was a sense of, you started asking questions like, why didn't Benji drive the car over to himself first?
Yes.
And then drive over to Tom?
Yeah.
And we realized the more time that we gave people to think about things, the more complex it made Ethan's dilemma. And what was most important in this scene was that Ethan be left with a terrible choice, and that Ethan end up having to choose between his friends and the plutonium. And the more we gilded that lily, the more people you just felt yourself asking questions.
Yeah.
I say people, it's usually us in the editing room saying, I'm taken out of this emotionally. And again, all of this is Lorne's score really doing a phenomenal job of keeping the tone and the emotion going. This was a tricky shot, how to prove a negative. How do you show that something's not there?
Mm-hmm.
And so we shot that multiple ways and finally settled on that crane shot.
One of our very few dissolves in the movie there, but it's definitely appropriate at that point.
Yes, I'm often Eddie is probably the only editor I've worked with who doesn't cringe when I suggest a dissolve, as though dissolves have become to dissolve somewhere along the line became taboo.
There was an editor's expression: "If you can't solve it, dissolve it." Which
and
I just disagree. I think it's totally appropriate to use those kinds of transitions.
Or I completely agree. We couldn't solve it any other way, and we dissolved it. That doesn't make it a bad thing.
Yeah. Amazing visual effects work from D-Neg on those aftermath shots on the news. You know.
Yes, all of that is blue screen projection on those TVs.
Yeah, and so they worked up some archive footage of those cities.
This was another scene. This was the first scene that I saw assembled while we were still making the movie. And I tend not to watch footage while we're shooting for this very reason. It depressed me to no end. When I saw the scene cut together the first time, I think it was 9 minutes long.
Yeah, yeah.
And had lots and lots of air. You didn't feel any of the emotional punches that we wanted to feel, which is the consequence of a rough assembly. And every time we cut the scene shorter, we thought we had cut it to the absolute bare bone.
Yeah,
and it couldn't possibly be any shorter. Then it was 8 minutes, and then it was 7 minutes. And there are all of these flourishes, all of these nice moments, character moments, great performance moments with all these three actors. Christopher Yonner here, who plays Delbrook, is an absolutely fantastic actor. And what we realized was with each flourish, the audience was having time to think about what was happening in the scene. And we started cutting closer and closer to keep the scene driving forward and taking things out. At one point he asked him, "Who are you? You're NSA or CIA?"
Yeah.
And Luther says, "We're what you might call the last resort." It was fun, cool stuff. But because he was asking questions, the audience was suddenly asking questions, and you felt people getting ahead of it. And we were asking people, when did you know? When did you know something was going on? And the more we cut the scene down, the later and later their realization was. And one of the things we embraced early on, that this is a moment where a lot of people
people were feeling like Ethan doesn't react like this. We know he's performing, and we've drastically reduced this and looked at the takes very carefully and found what we felt was a really good balance. So, because people don't want to believe that Ethan loses his temper in these kinds of situations. You know, they're like, wait, our hero doesn't do this.
Well, or that Ethan and Luther are fighting.
Exactly.
There's any conflict between them.
Yeah.
They're bothered by it. They're hoping that it's not what it seems. But also you could feel them as the drama started it started escalating. You felt people thinking, oh, okay, there's something going on. And
I love this. That little nod that he does. It's so cool because Delbrook can't see it, and he's like, yeah, this is all going to plan. When you watch this scene the second time, you can just see exactly how they're performing for the benefit of Delbrook there in the bed.
And that is something that we obsess about is the second viewing, is finding ways to make the film more entertaining the second time you come around, knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And there are nice little flourishes. Mission lends itself so nicely to it because everything is a shell game. Everything is a con.
Yeah.
There are nice little winks and nods that we do throughout, little behavioral things that are tell.
This music cue that's playing here used to be a kind of dread, sustain build. And very late in the game, you had the great idea of making it more of a simmering,
a flutter. Lauren calls it a flutter.
A flutter, and it's incredibly effective at making you feel like our guys have lost, and that Delbruck has got the upper hand.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because the music that you hear over the wedding at the beginning of the film is a piece that Lauren referred to as Love's Reduced. It was actually one of the first pieces that he sent us long before we had all started working together on the edited film. And it was this piece of music that we noticed remarkably worked in just about every scene in the movie.
Yeah.
You could put it anywhere and it worked, and it worked rhythmically. And we loved it so much, we had it everywhere. And then, of course, once you've fallen in love with a piece of music, the hardest thing is taking it out. And this was one of the areas where we had it. And it was very late in the game that we started to look at the score as the last element of how to crank up the pace and how to drive us through the movie without making it feel over. This was another moment at the end of the scene. It was very tricky. There was a lot more of Delbruck fading out and fading to black before it went to the credits. We sort of passed out from his point of view, and ultimately we sort of broke our own rules and came up with a much stronger cut. These are titles designed by the wonderful guys at Filmograph LA, who also worked on the last film, and they did such a great job in the last film for their, I guess what you would call their audition. They sent us 2 versions, and we liked them so much we put them both in the movie.
Yeah,
one was at the beginning and one was at the end, and it ended up creating something of a tradition for us of now bringing in the curtain call, which we do at the end of this movie as well. And this is also one of the more chaotic opening credits I've ever seen.
Yeah,
I love their idea of having everything burning.
Amazing music from Lorne. That was one of the things that he did figure out quite early on was how to play the opening titles. And there's when you go and watch a Mission Impossible movie, you're always thinking as a fan, like, how are they going to treat the theme music? What's the opening credit montage going to be like? Because they're so iconic in these movies. And so we really worked very hard to deliver, an exciting, different take and a different spin on that for fans of the franchise.
Yes, and this was another scene that we scored a bunch of different ways.
Yeah,
we're always playing with because you felt like you were in a title sequence and you wanted to feel that continuing.
Oh, there's a line here where Alec mentions plutonium, which we added later because we were trying to.
Which we can only assume
is our missing plutonium.
And it was originally Eddie's voice.
It was my voice.
Suddenly Alec Baldwin says, which we can only assume is our missing plutonium. But they had very similar voices. You're both speaking loudly.
Quite funny.
It sounded very funny.
Yeah, quite often when you're editing a movie, the editor or the assistant editors will lend their vocal talents and allow us to use temp voices to help clarify bits of the story, and then before we get the actors in to do the lines. So when you're watching an early assembly, it's sometimes quite amusing to hear all the different voices that get laid in.
This is also a wonder of color timing, things that people don't necessarily know about or ever see in the making of a film is the grading of the film and how we play with color, temperature, brightness, darkness, and how we bring out certain facial features. The light on the runway was very low, and it was a particularly tricky scene to bring out the negative and leave it feeling this sort of dusky feeling that it had. And you'll see behind the actors, you can see lights everywhere. Those lights actually, some of them are lights that we added. Others are lights that we had to turn on because the sensors hadn't come on yet. And it was all to give just a slightly stronger impression of nighttime as opposed to just low light. And you could see this whole scene has this sort of lovely, almost violet hue to it. All of that was brought out in the color timing.
Alec nails that line there. He just nails it. It's just a brilliant piece of writing from Chris, and Alec nailed the delivery. Interestingly, Angela had a longer introduction where she removed a security badge from a security guard, and people found her dislikable. Actually, found her character dislikable, and they'd kind of made a judgment.
They found her mean.
They found her mean. They made a judgment call right at the beginning of the movie about her character, and they thought she was mean. And we only really discovered that very late on. But in one of our friends and family screenings, someone said, I just decided that I didn't like Angela. And we said, why? And she said, well, she removes the security guard's badge. And we thought, oh, you're dead right. And
well, then we said, did anybody else feel this? And everyone in the audience raised their hand. No one had ever.
No. And so we took that out. It was only 20 seconds. We took it out, and there's enough of an introduction to her character here. And suddenly, she was just more complex.
Yeah.
She had more shades of gray.
Yes.
You were more interested to kind of find out what made her tick rather than just making a.
Well, audiences kept thinking that she had an agenda.
Yeah.
And we thought her agenda was very straightforward. This shot is a completely digital creation.
Almost impossible to film for real unless you had two C-17s.
Yeah.
You could film out of the back of one at another one, which you just can't really practically do.
And I was so upset about having to do it. And the wonderful guys at DNEG created that shot, and they created sort of like your perfect dream image of it, which of course didn't look real at all. And we discovered that the way to make the shot look real was there's the shot that you wanted, and now now give me the shot that I would have to settle for. What's everything that could go wrong? The framing wouldn't be right. The moon wouldn't be the way we wanted it on the day. The plane wouldn't be coming quite straight at you. There would be heat haze. There would be the more we added messy layers to it, the more the shot became real.
Interestingly, we did a version of this scene before Tom broke his ankle.
Correct.
And then Chris and I felt like we had a better idea of Walker's character and how Henry had, evolved the character. And this scene was rewritten and then filmed a second time when Tom had recovered. And
Tom also instinctively knew something was not right about the scene.
That's true.
And it was the only time in the entire movie where he looked at it and just said, this is not ready. And it was a very tough day.
Yeah.
We were going to have to, we ran out of time. We were going to have to do the scene very fast. And Tom just said, let's come back and do this another time.
Yeah. And we get a much better handle on Walker's character in that new version of the scene.
And the scene was more about conflict and less about information. And that was the big thing I learned on this movie was any time I could take information and turn it into conflict. I actually learned it on the last movie.
Yeah.
And so we were constantly striving for ways. That's really one of the reasons why Ethan and Walker's relationship was the way that it was. Even as Walker's character was evolving, it was always going to be an antagonistic relationship between them because that was more compelling to drive the scene forward. This shot is extremely, extremely difficult. This entire sequence is difficult. And in fact, at the time of our recording this sequence was not finished.
Yeah, we're recording this with about, 10 days to go until the premiere. And we haven't quite got these shots finished yet. So what you're watching will be the result of many, many hundreds of hours of work from the fine artists at DNEG. And we're still working on it right now, but it will look great when it's finished. We had a little, played around with the exact dialogue that's spoken by the guys here to clarify Walker's motivation, because people didn't really understand.
Yeah, they kept asking,
like, what's he doing? Why is he putting Tom's oxygen? And
well, what we noticed was that people tend to they've been outsmarted by missions so often that they're trying to outsmart the movie.
Yes.
And they're overthinking every little nuance. So when Walker disconnected his air hose, they were saying, was he trying to sabotage the mission? Was he? And so we had to go in and put that dialogue in. Also, we had to put the dialogue in over the establishing shot where Ethan is saying what they're doing, because people very late in the process, someone finally raised a hand and said, why do they have to jump out of a plane?
Yeah.
Why do they even have to do it?
Yeah, why can't they just drive up and attack me?
Yeah, why can't they just try? And it didn't matter that Alec Baldwin said you got to be there in 2 hours or any of that, unless you explicitly say it.
You know, we have to drop into France undetected.
Yeah.
And now, the moment we added those lines, everyone got it, and it was all fine. So
the cracking in this shot. What's amazing is Tom and Henry are actually over Abu Dhabi.
They're over a desert.
They're over
Abu
a
Dhabi,
desert.
over an airbase in Abu Dhabi, and so it's actually impossible for a computer to track the ground, especially since they're falling at nearly 200 miles an hour, and so the Paris background that you see is manually tracked in frame by frame.
Painstaking.
It was split into 15 sections, this shot, and amazing artists at double negative manually tracked the background on, and
you've also manipulated this because you've speed ramped.
Oh, yeah.
For example, here the camera actually took much longer to get to Tom, and there's a lot of what we call air in the shot. There just, no pun intended here, just a feeling of it, just things taking a little bit too long, and we crank the speed up to get it there. And of course, you then have to digitally smooth out.
Yeah. Editorially, you ramp shots from 100% to 120, 130, back to 100, just so that you kind of remove sections which are feeling slow, just to keep the excitement up. And again, this incredible piece of music that's playing was, written almost at the 11th hour as well.
One of the Tom had watched the sequence, and our original idea was that this sequence was going to be without music.
Yeah.
It was all going to be very much in Tom's ears, the sound of the wind. Also, we recorded all of that sound, and I like to avoid using score whenever possible, with action, if the action's done right. And Tom watched it and came back and said, it needs music. He's like, I just feel like it needs to be conveyed. So very late, we went into Lauren's room, sat down, and in the course of an afternoon, he wrote that piece.
And the sound team came up with the idea of having the voice, the female voice.
Oh, yes, they did. Victoria,
you're one of the sound team.
That's her voice, and they stuck that in. That wasn't even a conceit that we'd originally thought of.
Yeah.
And everything was designed to give a sort of ticking clock. Also, before we get too far, the line where he says you lost your oxygen.
Yeah.
In our obsession with cutting seconds out of the movie, we cut too quickly, and by not letting that moment breathe, there wasn't a moment for the audience to laugh at that line. And when we added time and we extended Tom's reaction and waited for the music, you felt the audience just enjoy that moment.
Now, interestingly, here you'll see on the deleted scenes montage a very ambitious sequence where Tom and Henry have to swing across a gantry in order to get access to the Grand Palais. But it was 4 minutes of amazing stunt work that we couldn't afford at this point in terms of the pace of the film.
It just killed the pace of the movie.
Yeah,
and
we needed to get to the dance floor. We needed to get to Finding Lark. We needed to get to the bathroom quicker.
It was also it was the first stunt that we shot. It was Henry's first day on the movie. It was a massive, massive undertaking to put cables and pulleys and all the gear we needed up into the gantries up above the floor, because 120 feet in the air. It was extremely dangerous. And we did not really have a sense of the scope and scale of the movie. Mm-hmm. And so this was a very big deal. This was one of our big stunts.
Beautiful lighting here in the Grand Palais.
Gorgeous. This is all Peter Wenham's design. Everything that you're seeing here, all of those lights and everything, we had only 9 days to shoot in the Grand Palais. And so I gave Peter a challenge where I said, you have 2 days to build and 2 days to strike the set.
Yeah.
So that we have more time to shoot. And so everything you're seeing was designed in such a way that it could be portable and it could be very quickly moved in and moved out, without a lot of heavy construction.
And this set, well, you can tell us stories about this set, but this beautiful set that's built at Leavesden Studios.
Yes.
And it was,
this set was our first day of work in London after we shot in Paris, then New Zealand, and then came and shot in London. And this sequence, we were shooting for the rest of the time we were in London.
Yeah.
Tom broke his ankle midway through shooting it. So that delayed our being able, so the set had to just sit for 6 months. And every time we had a little spare time, we would run in here and shoot little pieces of the in the toilet stall, and little inserts and shots at the mirror. We managed to get most of the fight done, but there were all of the many little pieces around it that were very complicated, and we had to keep going back. So, in fact, one of the shots, which I'll point out, was the very last day of pickups on the movie. It wasn't even the last day of principal photography. Pickups are where you go back and grab little bits of stuff that you missed or you find in the edit that you need. So this was, for the entire time we were in London, this set or pieces of it were waiting for us to come back and finish the scene. It took forever. These actors, they're just phenomenal. They were essentially cast off of their headshots. I had never met with them. They came in on the day. All of these guys, everything that they're doing in this scene is improvised. They were all just working with each other and responding to very, very, very basic direction. And they were just so good and so natural. And they all came together like they were old friends. I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
I believed in that minute. I believed in the group and their dynamic. They were really natural and very fun. They really are kind of the unsung heroes of this scene. They really make it. All of this dialogue is improvised. I didn't know any of what they were saying.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about the graphics on the Mask Machine done by Blind, a company who designed motion graphics for films in the UK here, and they did the
graphics
job.
And also so the Blind is doing the graphics on the top of the screen there, and DNEG is doing the actual forming of the mask. So a huge amount of effort from two different entities is going into making that mask.
I remember this top shot here, Chris. You sent me on you took a video grab off the video assist tab and sent it to me to go, check it out, dude. It's so exciting. Look at this fight. It's so cool. And then when I got the dailies, it was just extraordinary to put this together. It was such fun. It was quite tricky to make sure that, we didn't cross the line too much and that the geography was
We
consistent.
did once in that doorway.
Yeah, we did. But
it looked as though Tom suddenly turned into...
Yeah, but we figured it out. And then this insert was filmed 2 months later because we didn't have quite enough energy on the shot. And this is the very famous scene where Henry cocks his arm.
This is a nice improv from Henry, which suddenly turned into bigger than any action scene in the movie. People responded to that.
Yeah, it's great. And then look at them really going for it. Liang, the stunt performer here, is astonishing.
That's Liang Yang, who's an incredible wushu fighter.
Yeah.
And what's great for me is all three of the actors are giving it so much of their all. It's such a physically painful thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
And it allows me to not have to shake the camera and do a lot of crazy stuff. And it allows us to just sit back from the action.
And this shot coming up here,
this was the last shot.
The very last shot we did.
On the very last day. We just had a piece of ceiling and we brought Liang back because originally we didn't rack focus to the gun.
That's right.
And we realized this would be a lot more effective if we racked to the gun. You'll remember also that they ran into Rebecca before coming into the bathroom.
Yeah, that's right.
We originally had Rebecca's entrance to this, which you'll see in the deleted montage.
Yeah.
And when we cut that out, we realized her entrance was that much more effective. Mission is comprised of a lot of things that you think you need. We tend to over-explain. We tend to overwrite, and then we see how much of that we can take away. This is a shot using a prism on the lens, which enables us to get really low without having to cut the hole in the floor. And we had a shot like this in Rogue Nation, which we didn't have a prism, and we had to build a rostrum and
that's true.
Do all sorts of stuff.
Oh, the blood. Do you remember the blood? So that blood that you can see there was not in the film for the first 3 test screenings.
Yes.
And so people didn't understand that there was this massive pool of blood on the floor caused by the headshot. And all the comedy here didn't work. The moment we put that pool of blood on the floor with visual effects, the audience reacted in a completely different way. This whole section here makes so much more sense. They're seeing this massive pool of blood, and Ilsa is trying to pretend it's a nosebleed.
None of this worked.
None of this worked until we got that shot showing the blood and the smears, and everyone kind of goes, "Oh!"
And every time it didn't work, we go, "We need that shot. Where are they going to put the blood in?
When are we going to get the blood?" Yeah. Great line here. That's one of the best lines. Oh, you must be new. Everyone loves that
He
moment.
delivers it so
I
well.
actually added about a second of air after that so that the audience could laugh, because the next line that he says about, only have to be this guy for 5 minutes. People weren't hearing that in the screenings because they were laughing so much. So I added a second of air there to make sure.
And you remember this was a reshoot.
Oh, yes.
Where Tom actually originally took his jacket off and brushed all the dirt off of it, which you would. The jacket had all this stuff on it. But the physical movement of him putting his jacket on in the middle of those lines worked against it.
There's a running gag here where Walker introduces himself and people ignore him. He goes, "My name's Walker, by the way," and she goes, "Yeah, you're welcome."
One cares.
And then later in the film, when he says it to Benji's just like, "With the little car, your idea."
Yeah.
So that it's like this running gag that we discovered, that people just ignore Walker, which is one of the reasons why he's so upset.
It's also just a shorthand for the fact that he's a new character, and you have to get past the introduction of this character.
Yeah.
So it was a completely practical.
This was filmed on like day 2, I think, day 3.
Day 2.
I remember seeing the dailies of this and seeing them back together again, and them just nailing this scene.
And she
the
looks
emotion of it is
so
perfect.
phenomenal.
She looks amazing. And then you've got these angled mirrors and these lights. It's just visually astonishing. And
these last 2 lines.
Yeah.
Tom and I knew instinctively the scene needed something.
What you should have stayed out of the game.
Emotionally, yeah. And I came
up
up with that on the way to work. I said to Tom, it'll be in the scene. I just don't know where. And on the way to work that day, I realized what it was. And I pitched that to them on the
Now,
set.
this VIP room set was again built at Leavesden. So they walk from the Grand Palais and they will walk into this astonishing set at Leavesden. This was real movie magic. When you walked onto this set, you were transported to a different world. But there's a real story about the introduction of the White Widow here.
Well, originally what Rob Hardy and I, the cinematographer Rob Hardy and I were talking about, we wanted to move out of one world and into another. So the bathroom was one thing, the DJ, the rave was another, and this we didn't want it to feel like a nightclub you've seen in every other movie. There's a video on YouTube you can watch called Club Hell, where somebody has quite cleverly put together every fight in a nightclub. Tom's in it, by the way.
That's true.
And it's quite funny. It's quite clever, but it also shows you how generic these scenes become. And so we had this idea of a cabaret. And of course, the cabaret led to an idea that, hey, the White Widow could be singing. And you'll see there's a band back there and everybody is applauding. Well, what they're really applauding is Vanessa Kirby has just finished singing a song as our introduction to this character. And what we discovered was it threw the balance of the entire movie off. It created this introduction to her character that created a completely different expectation, and it also diminished all the tension in the scene.
Absolutely. And we talk about her having a charity fundraiser on the tarmac, at the airbase, and so it felt natural to put in a little speech about raising money. And we also have a little Easter egg nod to the first movie
when she refers to her mother as Mac.
Yeah.
That was again what we did was we said, okay, well, how do we get them to the bar if we're going to take out the music, this 2-minute long musical number? And we just cut all of the shots of the band playing, and what was left over, we then looked at and said, oh, look, we're on her back here, we're on her back there, she'd be giving a speech. And so we just went back to the stage and we got her first close-up. We shot in front of a green screen. And that was the way we could remove the song and include the speech. And then, of course, the night before, I thought, well, what should the speech be? And I wrote that speech for Vanessa the night before she came in to shoot it, and inserted that little reference to Max. That was actually something that Vanessa and I had talked about early on in the creation of her character, was the possibility that she could be in some way related to Vanessa Redgrave's character in Mission 1. All of this stuff, the shots of these guys, when Tom sees them walking in, none of that was, we weren't supposed to see them walking in. We were only supposed to see them come in very late. And Eddie and I realized that by putting the shots of them in earlier, even though the eye lines were wrong, and it created tension in the scene that
I love this shot, by the way. I thought it was beautifully directed. This idea of just these
this one right here,
these 2 close-ups here.
I must confess, this was Tom. Tom was, and this was a moment where Tom turned to me and he said, he said, there should just be a more intimate shot of us.
Yeah,
and
it's terrific.
So
I
we
remember
got out of
seeing those dailies
135.
and just thinking, oh yeah, that's money.
Yeah. And that line, the whole thing about, I know what you're thinking. It's again, something that we knew what we wanted was to convey the very complex idea that Tom was using the information that people were there to kill Lark in order to gain her confidence.
Exactly.
It's a very complicated idea. And Tom and I were on the set talking about it all day long, trying to figure out what's the idea, editing all of this stuff. This was, the eye lines, et cetera, and in the time that we had left to shoot it, it was very tricky to shoot. But actually, in the editing together, your first assembly is very much
now,
what we're looking.
Interestingly, Rebecca is pregnant in that shot.
She is 7 months pregnant in that shot.
And you can't tell because we're behind her. And it was filmed again. We went back after Tom had recovered from his broken ankle and filmed this fight. And so this was at the beginning, she's not pregnant, but at the end she is. Yeah.
And so those two shots, the shot of them leaving the bar and the shot of them walking out the, down that mirrored corridor were a year apart.
That's true. And you'll notice again on the deleted scenes montage, there's a little scene that we had outside the Palais where the widow's brother, Zola, attacks Ethan, and they're in a hurry to get out because the police are coming. But again, we wanted to get to this. The film really takes off once Ethan discovers that he has to break Lane out of prison. And so we wanted to get to this reveal and this dilemma and this kind of impossible mission for Ethan as quickly as possible. And so that scene was a casualty.
And the framing of this shot, we spent all morning figuring out. We wanted to be able to convey this sense of what have I walked into?
Exactly. What are these guys all doing?
And the room was originally beautifully furnished and the guns were all on the furniture.
Yeah.
I said, these guys have all just put weapons on their boss's furniture.
Yeah.
And I don't see the weapons. And so the set was impeccably dressed and I took it all out, much to the horror of the production designer, and brought in a bunch of plastic tables and Chinese food, but it drew your eye where we wanted it to go.
What's great about this scene, and when you watch these Mission Impossible movies, they break down into setup, suspense, and action, and that repeats itself the way that the scenes play out, and we're setting up for the audience here all the stakes of what they're about to see. And what's great about this is that you can then run the 20 minutes of action in Paris without any explanation.
You know what's supposed to happen, so you can enjoy.
So you can just enjoy watching the action.
Watching
so here
when it doesn't happen.
But it does look beautiful, this scene, and everyone is just.
I am loath to use the word favorite. This is without question my favorite edited and composed scene in the entire movie. It's a very difficult scene to shoot, and all of the coverage. This was one of two scenes where you just had mountains and mountains and mountains of coverage.
Yeah.
It's very, very tricky. And you'll notice when we cut to Henry, at specific moments in the scene, when he talks about Solomon Lane and says he used rogue covert operatives, we cut to Henry.
Yeah.
And we do that throughout the film. There are moments and references to bad guys, and we take those moments to cut to Henry. This shot right here is one of my favorite shots in the film. The lighting is amazing, but also the sense of power that you get between those two characters.
Yeah.
It marries.
And there, the composition, Ethan is surrounded.
Yes. And that we wait to cut to this shot until Ethan realizes that he's stepped into a trap.
Yeah.
And there were numerous other opportunities, but again, it's a very deliberate cut. And you'll notice the way the scene is staged. There's always someone behind Tom, between Tom and the door. There's always a sense of no matter what direction he would move, somebody's in his way. And there's even Henry standing in the door. There's the two guys behind Tom.
This is great because we only have 2 plutonium cores at the end of the movie, and yet there are 3 plutonium cores at the beginning of the film. And then, Chris, you had the idea.
The dilemma was, how do I get rid of
one plutonium core?
And there were all this conversation. Oh, it could get lost. It could this and that. And it was, again, on the way to work. I said, oh my God, I've got this
He
idea.
can just give it to him as
down payment.
And then they get one, but there's still two out there.
And it further sucks Ethan in.
Yeah.
It's Lane teasing Ethan right from the beginning, saying, "You want it? You've got to come."
Exactly.
This was very early on. Tom had suggested, let's see what was supposed to happen. But of course, in every Mission Impossible movie, you do that as the characters are talking. And I had the idea of doing it as a misdirection. And you and I debated for a really long time. When you first watched it, you said, you were saying, there's got to be sound here. They're going to know. They're going to know something's
I wanted
wrong.
kind of driving, music with momentum, and I wanted to feel like, the mission
was
had
happening.
Started. And yet, even with this is the Love's Reduced.
This is Love's Reduced.
Which we use in the wedding. And so even the very emotional music, people are absolutely believe that this is what is going on. It's only around this time when they've kind of, the pennies drop that this might be Tom. And he's like, wait a second, he doesn't. So they're starting to think, wait, this isn't right.
You also know, if you go back and watch this again, the complexity of shooting in a oneer, it's all about, this was all about trying to do this in as little coverage as possible, not to be showy, but to be more in Tom's point of view. And so we spent a lot of time designing that shot. And when in the shot you start to notice Tom, was all very, very carefully choreographed. And then of course here, when it snaps you back, this was something I really debated, because the mission never goes back. You don't go from one scene to another and go back to a location. And this is the first time that, it was the only instance in which we broke that rule.
Mm-hmm.
I was very hesitant to do it. And fortunately it paid off. And that music in the scene, the Love's Reduced, when we played it over that scene and saw how well it worked, it suddenly found its place in the movie. The music became about Ethan's regret. It became the embodiment of the emotional journey of this character, which was the most important thing for me. And so you'll hear Love's Reduced repeating itself throughout the movie.
I love this edit here where we chop the very top of this next scene off and come straight into the middle of the scene.
Yes, there was dialogue at the top of the scene, and we just pre-lapped a line.
Yeah, and we go straight to breaking Lark out of prison and her expectations of what this was supposed to be. And so you're thinking, oh my God, she was in on this and she's been planning it, and
And this was, again, when we took this line out, she said, "You're reaching, Walker, trying to cover your ass." When we took that line out, this scene began to feel conspiratorial.
Yeah.
When you took away a sense of a hierarchy in the scene, people started asking the question, going, what's Sloane up to in the movie?
Yeah.
And also in the wide shot, where you can put anything you want, you remember we simplified her dialogue. She was being a little bit cryptic about what she was after, and we simply stated explicitly what she wanted.
She wanted Lark. She wanted the plutonium.
And questions of her character went away. I especially loved when we were testing the movie, and you'd have the focus groups. There would be people in the focus group saying, "Well, I knew Henry. The movie was predictable. I knew Henry was a bad guy." And the Kevin, who was running the focus group, said, "Well, when did you know?" And they said, "Well, when Henry gives him the phone." And it's like, "Oh, you mean in the moment when we're clearly telling the audience that Henry's a bad guy?" And I loved your note, which was, he's got a mustache.
He's got a villain
mustache. Bad guy from the beginning of the movie. He's got a bad guy mustache. How can you not know he's a bad guy?
Yeah.
Angela, by the way, is so extraordinary and has such power. And the great time that I had directing Angela was telling Angela to be nicer with her most lethal dialogue. She really loved getting getting all the life out of it. And I just kept saying to Angela, your power is so innate and so inherent. You don't need to do anything to dominate. And Henry came up to me on the day and he was very complimentary of Angela.
So he's handing the phone over here. Yeah. And then we know that that's not the phone.
Now, that's neither Angela or Henry. This is months later. And the floor is a printout.
That's true.
We actually
print out the floor.
anytime you look at an insert like that in the movie, you're actually looking at a printed floor, somebody else's hands shot months later.
Yeah. Oh, look at that shot. That's beautiful.
And a tremendous amount of we had to remove that fence. You remember there was.
So they're actually down there in the bottom left of the screen. That's where they're sitting. That's why it's a nice juxtaposition of images there.
Now this was the first sequence that we ever cut together.
That's right.
It was one of the first things we shot with very little was missing. These close-ups of Ethan were all shot months later, and without them, there's no emotional build-up to this sequence. All of that was done later. And I remember I sent this to Tom. This shot was shot months later. Yeah. This is months later. This is shot on a stage in Leavesden.
Yeah.
When I sent this sequence to Tom, it was only for him to listen to Lorne's music, because this was the first.
Yeah.
This was the first.
Lorne wrote maybe a good hour of music for us, which were just suites of amazing music that he had written, just like, how about this? How about this? And he had written this incredible piece with this, which built and built and built and built. And we thought, you know where this would go? This would go on the build on, Lane arriving in the helicopter, and the build up to Ethan smashing the truck into Lane's van. And we put it on there, and we cut this. It was originally quite a bit longer, I would say. We were in love with a lot of the images, but we ended up streamlining it right down. But the music that you can hear is pretty much Lorne's demo as he presented it to us, months before we really got into writing the score.
Well, and what you had done is you had music edited it, because it was a 3-minute cue and you had to stretch it to 5.
Yeah, that's true.
And it was, and one of the things Eddie and I do, we do not cut with temp music. We don't use music from other films to score the movie while we're cutting. Everything we do is dry and without music.
This is a close-up, for example, of Tom that was filmed months later than this next shot coming up.
So that's London. That's Paris.
That's Paris, 6 months earlier. And so we wanted to get these very intimate moments with Ethan where we could see him thinking about Lane, and thinking about Lane's progress. And, Lane getting off the helicopter and Lane being put in the van and Lane on his way. And he's dealing with the fact that, he put Lane in prison and he's about to break him out of prison.
But this conversation between the two of them is untouched from Eddie's original edit. All of these choices, these looks, and, choosing to hang on Tom for that little uncomfortable moment. And this is actually Tom picking up the keys to get out of the car.
Yeah. So we moved that section where he puts the little camera on the car, and we put it first rather than. And then here, look at these shots. These are astonishing.
This was a great location. This is the Ministry of Finance in Paris, and again, this entire sequence is dictated by two very specific things. One, that you could land a helicopter on that great-looking, super modern building as compared to everything else in Paris, and that this location was the only place in Paris where you could knock a truck into the Seine.
Yeah.
And so everything here...
I love that shot where you just angle the camera so you see the little bike driving in the background. It's so well done. Look at that for an image. Wow.
These are,
look at the light. Look at the sky.
The sky, there's the train. And it was amazing. We got very, very lucky.
Yeah.
This truck was shot months later at Leavesden in front of a green screen. This was shot in Paris.
Yeah.
So you could see.
I love this. I love the way it's all building, and the audience is just leaning forward, going, oh my God, what's Ethan going to do? What's going to happen? What's going to happen?
And then you remember we kept getting notes that this was too long. And what we did here, you'll notice there's a change in the music.
Yes.
The cue had originally kept going. And when we first showed, we loved it. When you first showed it to people, you realized, well, why is it long? It's not that there's too much story. Why does it feel long? And we realized, God, I'm probably really tired of this cue by
That's
now.
because we were using a 3-minute cue that had been edited to 5 minutes. These are the close-ups of Tom that we put in to keep you connected with him.
And always cutting from Tom to Lane.
Yeah.
And cutting from Lane to the police, keeping the reminder that there are human beings here. This shot, there's actually been digitally altered because there was a big green boat that would cost tons of money to move. It was a restaurant. And what we ended up doing, and they just said, oh, we'll shoot around it. It ended up in every shot in the sequence, in the little video cameras, everything. And we had to spend gobs of money painting it out of all the different shots. It was big. The boat was just like not a particularly great color for the sequence. We called it the boat of shame. And the lesson I learned was just next time, just move the boat. And this shot here is actually a rig inside of on a soundstage.
In a
roll
big
over.
tank. Yeah.
Yeah, it could spin over 300.
You're looking at this whole sequence was so complex and was filmed in all kinds of different environments and cut together over, months, really.
Months and months. Yes. All these little pieces, the guys falling out of the truck, that was all shot at Leavesden. Of course, that's really, really Paris. And what happens is when you shoot a sequence like this, you have so much good material, you want to include it all. That's actually a green screen, and that's a pool.
Yeah.
On the back lot.
There's amazing special effects rig where the truck twisted, it was going underwater to generate these shots.
The green screen work is really actually quite extraordinary. It was pouring rain. You can see there.
Yeah, so this little section here was filmed, on a day that it was raining in Paris.
Yeah, and you have no choice. You just have to keep shooting and hope nobody notices.
And this is actually Simon Pegg.
That is
Simon
Pegg.
Trained to swim underwater, even though you can't tell it's him.
Yeah.
But he actually went and learnt and did all that. And
with a rebreather. And it was originally, in some of the shots, it's a stuntman, because Simon was very nervous about taking too much time to get in and get the regulator in Sean's mouth.
Yes. Sean is actually underwater with no air. That's actually him. And so...
in a straitjacket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he did it multiple times. And
this is, again, these close-ups. This is all stuff. The river, the Seine River, is so unhealthy that we actually didn't put anybody in the water in the Seine. That was all done on a stage back at Leavesden. Little things like this, the no signal, those graphics, they're all done after the fact, and there's a lot of specific storytelling. It seems like a throwaway thing. It's a lot of specific storytelling that goes into it. And here, at no point did the truck ever drive in this alley. The only time that's the only time the truck was ever actually...
That's a real alley in Paris.
That's a real alley in Paris.
Drove the truck in incredibly slowly and then built a little bit of extra set where you could wedge it.
And there's a wall right there.
Yeah.
Like we cut away. There's actually not, that street doesn't actually continue.
Yeah. It looks like he's driving out.
Yeah, he's driving and he has to literally stop a second later or smash into a wall.
Yeah.
And everything we did was to create length and to create greater scope here.
I love this shot.
Oh,
I love this moment here where Luther waves at the police as well. I remember
so
seeing it in the dailies. He just ad-libbed that moment. It's so cool.
It's Luther, it's Simon and Ving so inherently understand their characters.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, it's like in the last movie, Jeremy Renner and Ving became a double act almost by circumstance. Same thing happened here with Simon and Benji. And there was always talk about having them being competitive with one another because they're both tech guys.
Yeah.
And we just kind of
look at that shot, Chris, with the train going overhead. That's real.
Well,
you had timed all that so the train goes overhead.
All that to the train. All the actors are sitting in the truck, and you would wait because you could hear the train coming. And Tommy Gormley knew just.
I remember watching those dailies, going, "Wow, guys, you've nailed it."
Tommy Gormley is a great AD, assistant director, and he was so good at timing all of that stuff. Very meticulous and painstaking.
Tom riding the bike for real. This is. I remember getting these dailies and just going, "Oh my word, this is astonishing." And there are additional cars that we've added to make it look more dangerous, but still, he's still really doing this stuff at incredible speed, and it's just so dynamic and kinetic and earthy and real. It's just terrific.
There was originally a safety rig that we had built. I'm sure Tom and I will talk about it on that commentary, but there was a safety rig that would enable Tom to do all of this and never fall off the motorcycle. There was no danger of him crashing.
You're on the Rue de Opera in Paris. It's astonishing, this stuff. I mean, incredible work. And you only had like a day to film this and the Arc de Triomphe.
Yeah. We had 2 hours at the Arc de Triomphe and the rest of the day here. And this street, when I came to work that morning, was completely closed off, devoid of traffic, was deserted. And to be standing on that street where you had complete control of the location was really extraordinary. And here's the Arc de Triomphe. This was first thing in the morning. The sun had just come up.
Yeah.
They gave us 2 hours starting a half an hour before sunrise, which meant we had 90 minutes to shoot all of this. And we had to do very little in the way of adding cars. A lot of these cars are ours. We were there with stunt drivers driving around the Arc de Triomphe. that police car, obviously, we added later, so it didn't kill Tom. This particular moment. Really
apologies to Parisians, because the Arc de Triomphe is not down the end of that strip.
No, we've completely murdered all the geography. For as honest as we were with the geography at the start of this sequence, we've now just gone completely off the rails, and none of this is where it is. This was interesting. I never used slow motion. I'm not a big fan of slow motion. And you actually slowed this shot down, and your instinct was absolutely right.
It felt very much like, the audience needed a moment to breathe and just go, wow, did Tom just hit a car? And is he, and then it was your idea to just let this shot play and play. And originally we used to cut to this shot earlier. You'd see Tom jump over.
Yeah. Well, we played it. We shot it in every which way.
Yeah.
And you remember this. There's a moment here where again Love's Reduced played here.
Yeah,
not at this moment. Love's Reduced started playing there. Once you got over the fun of the chase, you went into Ethan's Regret, and Love's Reduced played all the way up until the French policewoman, and it's beautiful. That music playing in this moment, and what we realized was it was telling you that the sequence, that something was. What you didn't get was a sense that they had won.
That's right. You wanted a little moment, and
we were avoiding that.
Yes,
and we were avoiding that because we thought, we don't want that. But what we realized that was doing is it was actually undercutting the scene with the policewoman. You were telegraphing that something was coming.
Yes, exactly. And you had the great idea of getting the snare drums out and playing the plot theme,
the old-fashioned
TV
show,
and just allowing a moment for that, and everyone loves that. And again, Lorne wrote that very late in the day. It was the idea to change.
Yeah, it was the last minute. We just said, let's change this sequence. Yeah. In fact, he only had one day left of recording.
That's right.
Throw in all this.
It's just great, though. It's so much fun to hear that music just played completely straight.
And here's one of the last edits we made in the entire movie is we flipped these two shots. It was originally cut from that shot to the shot of Henry.
Yeah.
And we changed them, and it affected, just by her looking from Luther over to Ethan, it created a completely different emotional punch in the scene.
Yeah, this is a great scene.
This is Alex Benecek. She's absolutely fantastic actor. And was really wonderful. And it was Tom's idea to make this a policewoman. I had originally written it as a man. And Tom said the scene will be much more effective if it's a woman. And again, playing into the side that idea that Ethan.
You talk about this shot.
So that was never in the scene.
Yeah.
And we were watching this and saying it needs something else. And so we found those two shots of Henry.
Yeah. And we went.
And months later, we got a shot of him pulling out a gun.
And then there's a moment here where you think that Henry has shot the policewoman.
Yes. It's what I realized was I don't believe for a minute she's going to shoot Ethan.
Yes.
There's nothing Ethan can do to her. What can add tension to this scene before these guys arrive? Because originally what we had is Ethan saw a gun on the seat of the car, and you didn't know whether or not he had picked up the gun, and we didn't shoot it because on the day we looked at it and said, I don't believe Ethan's going to pick up a gun. I don't believe he's going to. It just felt false. But we knew instinctively that something needed to be there, and only discovered it months later. There's one shot of Alex.
Great sound design here. Should we talk a little about the sound?
The sound design, yes.
The trains going over the top, inspired a little bit by The Godfather, but James Mather and his sound team, they when they presented us with this, they had done this great sound design of the train going over the bridge, and it's incredibly effective to build suspense.
And Simon's dialogue in the background where he's saying, come on, we got to go. Originally, he said, Ethan, come on. And one of our friends watched it and said, he's not a very good spy. He's saying Ethan's name in front of God.
So we
re-recorded his dialogue and stuck it in the background.
Now, talk about Jenny, who rides the bike.
Jenny is this incredible rider who has won the Man TT twice and doubled for Rebecca on the last film and came back.
And there she is,
here. That wide shot.
And then here's the line where he says, name's Walker, by the way. And he says, was the little car your idea? he's ignored yet again. That always gets a big laugh. Everyone loves that.
The delivery, Simon's delivery there.
Yeah, it's so good.
This, I remember.
That's actually Rebecca there, because you can see her through the visor of the.
I can remember this as a particularly chaotic day. We had we had only so much time at these locations.
Yeah, but it's amazing. I remember seeing the dailies, and you've got Tom driving and all these guys. It's astonishing to see. You've got multiple cameras attached to the car, and Tom is doing this precision driving through these Paris streets. It's just astonishing to watch. Really great work.
We're also, you'll notice this is one of the few sections in the movie where there is no music.
That's true.
And
similar to Rogue, we got the car chase in Rogue Nation is the same.
That's right. That's right. And here's our little homage to these shots. These
my word!
These are such and the sound of the cars. Here's our little homage to
French
William Friedkin.
Yeah.
We kept calling that the Friedkin shot. Anytime you had the camera on the front of the car.
Yeah.
But this was the second day of shooting.
That's true. There were 2 profile shots of the car here, which you loved and you didn't want to cut out, and they're in the deleted scenes montage. You'll see.
I had to cut them out.
But again, people were giving us notes that this scene was just outstaying its welcome, and we went through every second going, does this deserve to be in the film? Does this deserve to be in the film?
Does it relieve you from the tension of the chase? We
Exactly.
had more of this. We had more fishtailing around corners.
Yeah. And
all of the shots were spectacular. It was great driving. And you remember how much we were worried about the ear, making it clear to the audience that Lane had been shot in the ear and not in the head. We did everything we could to bring
that shot of the handbrake was done right at the 11th hour.
Yes.
Because we wanted to it's just a great shot. And you have
it's obligatory.
You have to cut a car in half in order to get a camera down there. And so you always do it at the very, very end. It was the same on Rogue. There's a similar shot. We just have to cut a car in half and do it.
We actually saved that car. We only cut a piece of the floorboard out.
Okay. This is an amazing shot coming up here. Look at this precision riding from Jenny down this alleyway. She's going incredibly fast and has to stop and make a left turn right.
She has just enough time to get up to speed.
Oh, look at the speed. Oh, my word. It's like
amazing.
Yeah.
You made that tunnel look like it was 5 miles longer than it was. But
it was the hardest location to get when you were filming, I think, that tunnel.
Yeah. And all of this, with this, the sound design with no music comes from the fact that you have 2 different sounding engines. You have a motorcycle and you have a car.
Yeah.
The reason why we scored the motorcycle chase is that you don't have the variation in sound, whereas in a car chase, the engine becomes the score.
Yes.
But because this came at the end and not the beginning, we noticed we were getting notes, unlike the one in Rogue Nation,
yes.
where people saying that it felt long, and so we had to then go back and really design the music in the motorcycle chase and in the build up to the chase, because it felt punishing. You were already tired by the time Tom knocked the truck in the water.
Yeah.
So an incredible amount of time and effort went into the sound design of this whole 20-minute segment of the movie, so that it always felt like it was building and evolving. This location here is in the same location. If you look deep in the background there, that's where they're buying the plutonium.
At the beginning of the movie.
Beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And what we would do is we would come in the afternoon and shoot this scene until the sun went down, and then run across the street and shoot the other scene, the plutonium buying scene. And in both instances, separate issues, we had technical issues and had to go back to this location. It was like this location was these 2 scenes were cursed. We had focus issues, you remember?
Yeah.
We shot all of Sean's coverage and he went out of focus for his most important lines.
Now, interestingly, this dialogue that Lane is delivering here was originally in a scene in Rogue Nation.
The very start of it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, your mission should you choose to accept it.
Yeah. And I love the kind of 90-second countdown and the stopwatch. It gives this scene an enormous drive and momentum and an additional layer of tension.
And it was something, it was a choice I debated up until the last minute, because I worried, was this going to be distracting? Was it going to take away from the speech? And here's an interesting thing that we do. You'll watch the eye lines here. We're shooting on, Benji's looking left to right and then looking right to left. We've shot on both sides of Tom and both sides of Sean.
Yeah.
We only do this, and again, cutting to Walker just as he's talking about the syndicate.
Yeah, exactly.
All little things the second time you watch the movie and know who people are.
Yeah.
But so this is, you'll see Sean is looking from right to left. Tom is looking from left to right. But we also shot on the other side of the line. So that
I love the sound design here. You should have killed me, Ethan. How everything goes.
And Tom's
drops
performance
out.
here. You remember we had a much shorter beat, and Tom said, "Go back. I gave you a much better reaction to that."
It's so great, and it harks back to the wedding at the beginning. And he's like, "Wait a second, what did you say?"
Yeah, it's very rare that Tom will give a performance note. He'll always look at his performance as you put it together, and he'll say, "I acted it. I can't really judge it." And this was one instance where Tom came and said, "I think I gave you a longer look, more of a reaction to that. We were playing it much differently," and he was right. It's much more
this moment here, it worked incredibly well. It's one of those things where you had an idea about all the sirens going past, and until we got the sound design exactly right, everyone was looking at it going, "Are they listening for the? Are they?"
It's a pregnant pause.
Yeah, they were like, "What are they doing? Are they going to make it explode or something?" But it just works incredibly well. And we used to have a little line from Henry.
There was a little wink here where Henry, as he's walking away, says, "I can kill them all now, and we can walk away." And Sean says, "Death is too good for Hunt," and we cut it out very late. We didn't need it.
We didn't need it.
Yeah.
Again, this is a stunning location. Vanessa Kirby looked fabulous. The scene was originally a lot longer. We trimmed it down to the bare essentials. But look at that.
It was explaining a lot of plot. It was explaining who the bad guys in the nightclub were, and they'd been hired by Zola because Zola was trying to protect her from Tom, who he believes is Lark. It was a lot of character stuff, and it was also just stuff that you weren't listening to, and people didn't need explained. I was so worried that people were going to be asking, well, who were the guys in the bar trying to kill?
We just wanted to get to, where's Lane, because he's standing at the bottom of the sand. We wanted to get to that line.
We also debated this because this builds up a kind of tension. This establishes a conflict between Rebecca and Vanessa that doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah, when she says, I want her Lark. Yeah. And you're going to bring it to me.
What we were really interested in, what we did, we debated cutting it out. We kept it because of the pressure that it puts on Ethan. And a word that Eddie hears me use almost constantly is pressure, from not only the content of the scene, but the way the scene is framed. Even here, you're framing it in such a way that, look at Ethan backed up against the corner of the frame. There's constantly a sense of creating pressure within the frame, within the story, within the structure. So that you're feeling pressure down on Ethan and by extension pressure on his relationship with Rebecca. This we changed at the very last minute. She originally had a line where she says, "I do like your style, Lark."
Yeah, that's true.
And people were bothered by the kiss. They weren't seeing what we were. I always thought it was kind of this little. It was scary, a little bit. It was a bit threatening. But by having that line, people thought she was smitten. With Tom,
and now she's
dangerous.
It's just this. She just wants something, and she takes it from him.
Here's a cheeky little wipe.
The only wipe in the film, but it does work. And here is a montage which, when I saw these dailies, I thought, okay, I know what Chris is going for here. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, is the film going to be able to sustain this? It's a very, intimate moment with Rebecca where you're given time to connect with her as a character, and it's poetic, and it's the very definition of shoe leather. It's characters walking, and most of the time you're very aware as an editor of travel in scenes and geographical movement of characters and trying to minimize that and get to the drama of the scene. But in this case, the film, you actually embrace it, and you enjoy the moment of connection with her and feeling for her. And again, you've got this great music playing.
It's working on several levels. One, Rebecca embodies what you look for in a leading lady, which is, I don't know what she wants, but I want her to have it. And just watching Rebecca walking after him, the sense that you get of her need, and the more you're withholding that, the more it almost becomes a suspense sequence. This whole idea of her following Ethan and Ethan turning the tables on her was Tom's suggestion days before we shot it. Tom had made that suggestion, and we didn't have a location. We went and scouted restaurants and everything. And where they're standing right now is just to their right by about maybe 30 yards is where Jenny was riding her motorcycle down that corridor.
I didn't know that.
And while we were there, you didn't know that this
didn't know it was
it's
right
all in the
next
same
door.
geography.
No,
Look, you can see the
great.
colonnade.
Okay, that's fine.
This is where Jenny was riding her motorcycle, and the car chase goes around the outside of that square.
Wow.
And I looked at it and I walked that geography and realized, this is the perfect place to do this. And what I love is Rebecca's wearing a green coat. Tom's wearing a green suit.
That's true.
And neither of them, but Rebecca just picked her clothes that day. And Tom, we picked that suit at kind of the last minute. He was originally going to wear something else before we picked this location. And I look at this shot. Everybody, it's all looks as though it was designed.
Yeah.
And in reality, it was a series of really delightfully happy accidents. And of course, we were shooting at just the right time of day. And of course, here, this is not. This is a really wonderful. What you're not seeing, it might look like it's all natural light, but it's actually Rob Hardy and Martin Smith are actually bouncing a lot of natural light in there. So that you can actually see the actors. It's very shady in there.
Yeah.
So while all the light looks completely natural, it's actually very, very particularly crafted by Rob and Martin.
The performances here are so good.
So the performances are great. Their chemistry is really wonderful together. And there's a moment at the end of the scene where we originally cut to Angela Bassett.
That's true, which you'll see in the deleted scenes.
You'll see a glimpse of it in the delete. She's calling Alec Baldwin to say, this is what just happened in Paris. And we took it out. And when we took it out, just to see if we could remove it, this happened.
Yeah. So instead of dissolving to Angela at the CIA headquarters, we dissolved to Ethan's dream. And
Love's Reduced, which you're hearing playing throughout here. Remember, we went to Lorne and we said, well, the music didn't work in a dialogue scene.
Yeah.
And we just said, just take out all the high strings.
Yeah, so we just
took out
ended
the
up
high
with
string.
the low strings, and that's what you're hearing here.
Yeah, all we did is just take the same piece of music, took all the high strings out and let it play.
Yeah, and it just becomes this incredibly, such an intimate moment for Ethan. And
it goes from being sadness and regret to being another kind of emotion entirely.
Yeah. And
that was another musical secret we unlocked.
And another great mission trick is to not show that much travel from one location to another. And magically, within a few seconds, we've traveled from Paris to London. Ethan wakes up and he's already in a van in London, and
in a strangely jarring way. In this one, we were sort of pleased with the effect. But you were suddenly ahead. You're like, wait, what? How much of that was a dream? There's a strange feeling of.
Yeah, it's very effective. This is one of your favorite cues.
Oh, without question, this is in my top two.
Yeah.
I love this cue and just the pace that it gave. And here we are at Pennington Arches. All of this sadly is gone now. It's all been developed. We were there days before they were going to start construction in here, and we were racing to finish shooting because we knew we could never come back. And then, of course, here...
the arches
are
almost an exact 2:40 aspect ratio arch. It's so cinematic. It's fantastic. And all the lights that you added give it such depth, and I love it.
Yeah, that's all of our lighting that Martin brought in. And this common motif of these little fluorescent lights, and all of them are very well considered, very well thought out where they go. And they provide almost all of the light for this sequence. Much of what you're looking at, almost all of what you're looking at, is practical. When we came here, I realized we were going to have lots and lots and lots of pages here, and so the idea became about, well, why don't we change the lighting when the gunfight starts? And I said, let's have all the lights go out. And Martin and Rob looked at me kind of horrified. I said, well, you're going to be shooting in the dark. And I said, no, you remember when we came and scouted the location, there was a construction light in the corner. Mm-hmm. And that was the only light in there. It was a single source, really bright all the way at the far end. And the shadows are very eerie. And I said, I'll have emergency lights come on, and that'll provide it. And that's And that's what gave this its whole, that's what broke this up so that it didn't feel like the scene happening in the same location. And this was also millions of miles of footage.
Yeah, this was a lot. I remember it took me 2 days just to watch the footage and break it down, and then another couple of days to assemble this scene. Just, there's so many dynamics, there's so much choice of coverage. But again, we used every single angle.
Yeah.
And again, here we get there's a fantastic moment for the audience when he's like, why do I have to be lame? And I'm working on it. There we go. And what's great about this is that everyone is performing for the benefit of tricking Walker. And you only realize it when you watch the film the second time. I love it. Even Alec is playing, even Hunley is playing along with this whole performance that they're doing. But on the first time you watch the film, it's this amazing conflict, brilliantly written by Chris and brilliantly performed by the actors. It's all conflict. It's all, you're learning stuff about this file, you're learning about Ethan, you're learning about Hunley, you're learning about
all information.
All information. You're going to learn about what they're going to do with the mask machine. But again, it's a trick on the audience and it's a trick on Walker. And it's so much fun when you watch the film a second time and you realize what's going on, because for the audience, it's all very useful information, but it's all there. Ultimately, it's a trick, and all of this is for the benefit of Walker in the background watching. It's so clever. It's just great.
And this, well, thank you. Nice
It's great.
It's well edited. Thank you. But this scene was not written before. We wrote this after Tom broke his ankle.
That is true.
We wrote this during the hiatus.
This was one of the scenes that came up during the script development after Tom broke his ankle, when we realized what we needed this scene to be about.
And there was a French safe house. There was a Paris safe house right after the car chase where they had to Tom had to give the widow $30 million. He had to pay. He's posing as Lark.
Yeah.
And Lark had agreed to pay her, and he has to figure out where the money is.
Yeah, you see those images in the deleted scenes montage. You'll see shots of Lane in handcuffs.
Luther finds the money on the magnetic strip of a hotel room key. It was all this plotty stuff that was creating obstacles for our team. And in the scene, Luther says to Ethan, and we used it in the trailer, he says he's not some assassin.
Yes.
He's not some observer. He's an assassin. But as I was writing this scene, I realized it's so much more interesting here.
Yes.
And when I wrote those lines, I realized, oh my God,
I love the performances here. Both of them are on fire.
They are on fire.
It's just this whole section is just, this whole scene just.
Both of them are also in extraordinary pain.
That is true, because Tom was still recovering from
Tom had been finished the foot chase the day before with a still broken ankle. He's in extreme pain, and Alec is days away from getting a double hip replacement. And his hips are absolutely. I hope I'm not telling.
Maybe we shouldn't put that bit in this.
No, Alec will be fine. So Alec was in real pain. Tom was in real pain, and they were both powering through this. To keep that in mind as you're watching these actors in such a great scene. They're both in real physical agony.
Yeah. So
and this moment right here was taken from the and then of course this moment.
It's the job. No hard feelings.
Yeah, Henry just delivers it, and by having that happen in that dynamic, it went from information to conflict.
Yeah.
And everything that was the death of pace in the movie suddenly became a scene that's really for me. It's one of my favorite scenes.
You're leaning forward the whole time, which is incredibly difficult to do in a dialogue scene that's like 6 pages long.
Very hard, and it's so much obligatory information. The audience.
Another fantastic music cue starts. Now watch this shot here of Henry. This is one I love. Watch this. The camera pushes in, and then right at the end, you just get this beautiful flare that just comes up there. It's so nice. I remember when you were doing that, you were like, no, just do it. And you did it like 6 times. And on the last one, you got the flare just perfect. It was so good.
Was I going for the flare?
I don't know. It sounded like somebody was, I could hear Rob going, wait, the flare. Anyway, you got one. Look at these. It's beautiful.
I was so nervous about the flares. I was looking at these and I was like, are they distracting? They're going into people's eyes.
It's great fun.
This is in-camera mask shot, which we.
I remember this was another one where you sent me a video of the video tap
of the shot
just to go, hey Eddie, check it out. And I was looking at it going, how on earth did you do this? But it's a motion control rig, and you had a visual effects artist on the set just do a quick comp of this and send it to me. And I was like, how on earth did you look at that? It's so cool.
So a motion control camera is a camera that you program in the move, and it moves the same way every time. So we simply had Sean sit in that chair, and then had Sean sit in Simon's chair, and then had Simon sit in Simon's chair.
Yeah. Oh, it's very cool.
So it's all real. It's all in camera. You just stick the two shots together.
Yeah. Fantastic music playing through here from Lorne. It's great. And you think they're going off to do this big exchange. And yet what happens in the story is you stay with Walker and we see this story, but they've been planning this all along. I love this insert that you did here. We're going, oh, look,
something's coming.
And there's the tracker. And here's the knife that he's going to use later.
We went back and reshot. That was Tom going, he goes, get a shot of him getting the knife out of the bag.
Yeah.
And we did, but he didn't take it out of the sheet. And so you couldn't tell what it was.
Yeah, exactly.
And he said, it's going to, just by putting that shot in there, you're going to have this sense that something is coming. In the back of your mind, you're going to know this means something. And this was originally a much longer scene, which you'll see bits of that explained everything in the movie. It explained everything Walker did, every where the plutonium went, et cetera, all of this, and you didn't need any of it.
Yeah,
and we cut right to the gag, and the photography was beautiful. There's great silhouette shot.
Again, you'll see them in the you'll see a couple of the shots in the deleted scenes.
And you'll see this. The camera has just crossed the line. We were over one shoulder. Now we're over another. And
I love this stuff. Henry's great here.
Henry's really great here. And they were great. Coming into this scene, I was really, it was a lot of dialogue, and we had just shot the other scene, which was a lot of dialogue. So I kind of developed a gauge for how long it took to shoot in here.
Yeah.
And I thought we would never, ever get out of this room with all the exposition in the scene. And these guys nailed it. Every shot they did in 2 takes.
Yeah.
And in every
Sean
shot, you see the mask
machine is just
lurking in the background.
Sean loved playing Benji.
He did. He loved it. He said to me, he goes, to me, I think Benji thinks he's giving the performance of a lifetime. So I'm actually overacting. And I said, no offense, Sean, you should try overacting more often. You're really good at it.
And I love this moment here. The audience just goes nuts. If you watch this film in a theater with the audience, the penny is dropping for them at the same time as it's dropping for Walker, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's Benji in a mask! Oh, it's so cool!" And as we all know, Benji has never been able to wear a mask in any of the movies, apart from in a flash forward in Rogue Nation, and now he gets to wear 2 masks in this one.
It's inadvertently become a thing. It was never by
for the
design.
Fans. It's very rewarding to see Benji get to wear 2 masks.
This was Alec improvising a line.
Huge reaction from the crowd. Everyone loves Hunley here.
And Alec was having the time of his
satisfying.
life. By the way, everything that happens to Alec in the movie is Alec's suggestion. He said, when I asked him to come back, he said, I'll come back, but I want to die. I want to die saving Ethan.
Yeah.
And he goes, the idea of taking a bullet for Tom Cruise really appeals to me. And I said, you want to get, like, no other actor wants to get the phone call of, we're going to kill you off. And Alec called me. I was like, let's do this. And the needle in his neck was another thing where originally Ethan pulled a gun on him, and he's like, why pull a gun? It's just another page of dialogue. Just stick a needle in my neck and get me out of there. And all of that, those requests turned into what is, one of the more effective scenes in the movie. The audience really responds. And Alec is he's having such a great time.
Yeah.
And one of the really beautiful things that occurred in the shorthand of everything we were doing, you very quickly develop an affection for this character. Alec is so fun in that scene.
Absolutely.
And a moment later, we take him away. And the first screening we went to for an audience, and you heard their reaction when Alec gets stabbed, you knew right then that this sequence was worth it. You're always afraid of sequences like this because audiences are so hungry for the next thing. And to, you've got to be constantly visually changing and visually engaging.
They love this as well. This was an ad lib.
It's a Luther ad lib.
The bad boy.
Yeah. Ving is great. Ving is so great and so comfortable in the character that when it comes time to shoot his coverage, Ving's just like, give me the line and I'll give it to you 5 times. And he just says his lines very quickly.
Yeah.
He's not precious about it. And I will just I'll create moments like that for Ving, and I'll just go, do whatever you want. And he gives me 5 or 6 things. And
editorially, this was a very difficult scene. to explain where Ilsa was, to understand.
She actually entered.
She used
much
to come
later.
in much later, and we put her in there so that you understood that she was there.
It's a total cheat because she's actually where she's standing. She's actually standing. She would be standing right next to two of the.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's a complete manipulation.
It's just explaining. The audience was quite confused about what was going on here until we managed to figure out the order of events. And
well, there's so much happening simultaneously, and that's a big thing that is developed in this movie. That the helicopter chase has a lot of simultaneous action as well. That you have to embrace the idea. To explain
that the soldiers are kind of killing their own guys, and then
not seeing Walker before he knocks Benji out.
And then it's the kind of percussive nature of this sequence in terms of the short shots and the gunshots. We're in the dark, trying to make sure everyone understands where everyone is, that, you know, and trying to keep the action alive. So Ilsa and a guy are having a gun battle, Ethan and a guy are having a gun battle. You know, their Walker can see Ethan, and now Hunley jumps in, and we were the more we tried to make the gun battle clearer, the longer the scene felt. Yeah, exactly. So we ended up reducing it, and there's the reaction.
And we intercut the punches with the knife. Remember, originally he pulled the knife out and stabbed in the same motion.
Yeah.
And it felt a little bit like Alec was waiting.
I love this shot coming up now. This is pure McQuarrie choreography. Look, watch this. This, where you can see the geography clearly. I love that stuff. Chris is so good at directing that.
Well, thank you, Eddie.
It's true. And then I love this shot here where you see Walker running down at the end.
I love. Right,
look at that. There he is.
Him in the background.
It's so good. It's so good.
These little glimpses and little details. I tried very hard because we had so little time, and I did not know what the gunfight was until the day we got to work. I'd never had time to come down to the location and work it out. And my plan was, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a handheld camera and make it real shaky and dark in here. And it'll barely make sense, and you'll kind of cut it together in your mind. And as soon as I tried doing that, everything unraveled, and I went right back to what I always do, which is geography. Yeah. It's the key to action for me is clarity and geography. These shots. This was this was once Rob and Martin.
Oh, interestingly here on Hunley, we added these go. He says,
yes. That was added. That was a late Tom suggestion.
Yeah, he was like, Hunley's got to say something, and so we slipped in these goes into his mouth.
The audience kept saying that they wanted more of a moment here. Yeah, and we didn't want that. We didn't want.
Yeah, he originally said
Walker. Yeah, like
and
Walker
it didn't quite work. But then when he says go, it's very powerful.
That was Tom in the middle of the night calling and saying
it's terrific.
But you see here, it's like all of this lighting, these emergency lights. Once Rob and Martin embraced it, they killed it. I mean, it's very hard to do.
Oh, it's fantastic,
and it's so good.
And there's Ilsa saving Ethan's skin again.
Yes,
she does it several times in the. Movie.
It's an interesting thing, and it is that Tom Cruise. He's not afraid to get his ass beat in the bathroom. Yeah. He's not afraid to have the woman come in and save him. It's so much of these movies is about what Tom gives to the other actors that would normally be viewed as kind of a sacrifice for his character. Yeah. All of this broken foot. Yeah. This is all true. After Tom has broken his foot. There's only one shot in the foot chase where his foot is not broken, and it's the shot where he breaks his foot. Yeah. And this was I remember watching these dailies in St. Paul's Cathedral with, how many hundreds of extras, astonishing. And then we've got the choreography is so cool in this one. And a note to the extras themselves. They're all so good. Yeah, extras are very hard. Yeah, look at them. Hundreds of extras are even harder. And the performances of the extras, rewind and just watch all of them. Yeah, they're great. They're really great. This is hard stuff to do. Yeah. Authentically. And we give props to our colorist, Asa Shul, who the color in this film looks great, but he also managed to dig out the coffin and the crowd and make sure that story was told really well. Because it was kind of a discovery we made. Yeah. Where we're shooting that water and you go past the coffin. Yeah. We realized it was this. I love this gag. Everyone loves this gag here. I remember seeing this shot. These graphics were done afterwards by Blind. They're beautiful, very clear storytelling. And then here we are in the Whispering Gallery. So if any of you have not been to St. Paul's Cathedral, this is a nice little trip. Normally this is crowded full of people and you can't get up there. And, it's an amazing place to go and visit. And everything happening with Benji in this sequence did not yet exist. That's true. We were running through this This stuff we shot the day Tom broke his foot.
That's true.
It broke his ankle. We didn't have anything else to shoot.
Yeah,
so we just went with Henry and walked around the streets to find interesting places for him to walk.
So all the stuff with Benji, we were coming up with the lines, and then you were feeding him all the lines in the back of the truck.
Yes.
And he was ad-libbing.
And Tom would just always ask me, he's like, can I say something to Benji here?
Yeah.
And so we would, so all these lines are kind of being made up just based on the shot.
Yeah.
And it would then obligate us to create dialogue for Benji later.
Yeah,
but
here we are.
It was kind of like writing the punchline and then writing the joke.
I mean, these are all extras. It's astonishing when you think
that's Blackfriars train station.
Beautiful geography. Here's Tom.
So Tom's foot is broken in this shot.
Yeah, so
in this moment,
he's running.
2 shots stitched together.
Yeah,
and you're going to see this shot turns into.
There's a stitch right here.
A stitch right there, and now he's about to break his foot.
Yeah, there it is.
There it goes.
In less than a 24th of a second, his foot is broken.
And all of this is Tom realizing his foot's broken there. He's just broken it.
Yeah.
And he realizes, I got to finish the shot because we're not coming back.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, all of this, again, geography, you and I were talking about this yesterday. There's 2 sequences in the movie that take place on a U-shaped geography involving a bridge divided by 2 locations divided by water. Mm-hmm. There's when Lane lands his helicopter at the Ministry and ends up in the Seine, and when Tom starts at St. Paul's and ends up at Blackfriars or at the Tate Modern. That all came from scouting these locations and saying, okay, well, what if it happened here? What would we do? And ironically enough, I only realized days ago that, wait a minute, I did this in Jack Reacher. In the opening of Jack Reacher, the sniper sequence was a similar.
I love this moment.
So apparently that's my thing now.
This is very funny. The way that Lorne stopped the music here is so good. And all these reactions from Luther, music stops. Fantastic reactions.
And that shot is actually edited. That's actually...
Oh, it's a stitch together of 3 different bits.
It's split screen, so we could time the performances of all the actors. Yeah. The shot actually directs your eye.
Yeah, and then I remember watching these dailies and my mind just being blown by the fact that he was running across Blackfriars Bridge for real. I mean, this is nuts. This is like on a Sunday, at 2:00 in the afternoon, maybe.
And this is
there's a helicopter, and he's got a broken. He's running on a broken ankle right at this point because
yes,
he's still recovering from the injury.
Yes,
and then here's the Tate.
And now it's winter, by the way. The chase started. You'll notice that they started in the spring. The one of the shots, and every other shot in the winter.
Oh, this is the most awesome Tom Cruise running shot.
This was his last running shot in the movie, and he was going for it.
He's really,
he was so relieved.
Again, that's probably the loudest music cue. It's fantastic, the percussion and the way that the music builds.
And all practical. The helicopter up there was real.
All real.
We did. I thought for sure we'd have to edit it.
Now this is manufactured. This lift shaft up the side of the Tate Modern is kind of manufactured for the film.
Yes, this is built on a stage. At least,
but
it has 20 feet of travel. It's not we had to do, everything is a manipulation of light and image. The elevator stops right there. Tom actually had to pull his legs up to get him out of frame.
That's true.
To make it look like he was still moving.
This is a great moment from Henry. Henry just looks phenomenal here.
So all of that's a digitally composited background. That's all blue screen to make the elevator look as though it's moving.
Yeah.
And Tom's performance is so good here. I really like these 2 guys together. And these are things that, that you don't think about. Tom hanging on to the bottom of that elevator. He's obviously he's got a harness, but his arms are really supporting most of his weight, and it's just an extraordinarily uncomfortable position to be in, to be acting. And you remember we debated here how to shoot this, who saw the picture first.
Yeah.
Originally, we were in Tom's POV. And it actually took away from his ability to react to the photo.
Exactly.
And we recut it so that Tom saw the picture before we did.
I love this shot. Look at this. Oh, and there's some fabulous camera work coming up here.
And lighting
stuff. My God, I love it.
This is all stuff that,
so good.
This is the stuff of the movies I really love. A movie that Rob Hardy and I talked about quite a bit was Clute, Alan Pakula film, shot by Gordon Lewis.
Great sound design on the elevator. I know that it's a tiny detail, but I remember when the sound team delivered the sounds for the elevator, I thought, wow, you guys have nailed it.
This was a roof we built on the back lot at Leavesden.
That's right. And then that's Tom, for real, on the top of the Tate Modern, you built a construction elevator up the side of the Tate Modern.
No,
but the stunt team,
a ladder.
A ladder.
It was a rickety wooden.
Look at this.
It was. I would never have gotten
music.
near
It's
it.
amazing.
I would never have gone near it. It was horrible.
Oh, it's money. This is so cool.
And of course, you can see that the hatch Tom came out of is not there. It's someplace else. It's a complete.
And actually, this was an idea that you had when you saw it. You're like, we need a close up of Tom, and you went the next day. You went to Leavesden and filmed that close up.
Shot him standing. He's standing on a rostrum.
Yeah,
like a 3-foot-high platform. And
now, originally, we used to have another scene in here
that you'll see a glimpse of in the deleted montage,
where Ethan and Ilsa had a kind of intimate moment.
They have kind of a conflict in an intimate moment, and it was an idea that it's the way the lane scene was kind of the one we shot in Rogue Nation was almost like a test version of what ended up in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that scene is gonna find its way in down the road. The less said about it, the better, because it'll show up. She is 7 months pregnant here again, and the costume designer Jeffrey Carlin is doing an excellent job of concealing that. Rebecca was an absolute trooper. Considering when she found out she was pregnant, it was days after Tom had broken his ankle. We weren't expecting to be shooting this far into her pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Tom's broken ankle then compounded all sorts of editorial chaos for us. This was another one where I came in not knowing what to expect from these two actors, having had no time to rehearse it. And so I didn't know what this was, I just didn't know how long this would be, how difficult it would be to get to the emotion I was looking for. And Ving really the first time he said it, I was so touched.
Yeah, I remember you calling me and saying,
I said, Ving
nailed this.
Really surprised me. And they're so good together. They're really, that's what I love about this and Rogue Nation is the pairings that we discovered of different actors mixing people together that might not normally end up together, and it's been really wonderful, and especially seeing Ving with Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
It's another really nice color. And this is again, you're hearing the music that's playing in here is
it's the lower
strings from Love's Reduced. It's that same thing. So you feel Ethan in the scene, even though
the same
he's
music
not there.
we're using as she's walking through Paris. Yeah.
Yes, and I wanted this scene, writing-wise, I wanted it to be a haiku. I wanted to be able to tell the story of Ethan and Julia in as few words with as little visual information as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And this scene is inspired by a scene in Sidney Lumet's The Verdict, where Jack Warden tells Charlotte Rampling all about Paul Newman when he's not in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very efficient bit of storytelling. And we agonized about cutting the previous scene because it established this environment.
Mm-hmm.
It showed you that it was a parking garage that had standing water.
Yeah, you'll see again in the deleted scenes montage, you'll see an image of Tom walking down this kind of wet,
because it's a strangely alien environment.
Yeah,
going, where are they?
It's a kind of flooded underground car park,
and it was really flooded. We didn't have to do that. It was all day long. We were sweeping water down the drain, and then water would just slowly seep in through the floor. Again, a music cue that we struggled with for a really long time, just to get it just right, to get a sense of pace. And a sense of rhythm, but not step on the music.
On the dialogue. Yeah.
And you remember we had more of a team moment here. There were kind of more looks to each other.
Yeah, right at the end there was a moment where the team all kind of sized each other up and they were like, right, we're going to do this. And she said it's a suicide mission and they don't know how they're going to defuse the bombs, and they're going into a really, really dangerous situation.
And
together.
This is Ilsa really becoming part of the team.
Absolutely.
And so we had a moment where they were all looking at each other.
And Benji kind of nods at her and says, right, welcome to the team,
And it's really lovely, the looks they all give to each other. And when you saw it in front of an audience, you just went, my God, what are we doing?
Yeah. So we
just get to Kashmir.
Yeah, exactly. It was only about 7 or 8 seconds, but it was just too much.
Yeah. We abbreviated it. And then this is the beauty of a thing like Mission Impossible. You just cut to Kashmir.
Yeah. Go to Kashmir. Music. Jake directed these shots. Jake Myers,
yes,
producer.
our producer.
Beautiful shot. Look at that. Amazing.
This is all New Zealand. And this, of course, is one of the few uses of all green screen environment in the movie.
Yeah.
We were slated to shoot this scene on a day that we shot a scene where the team comes to a border crossing, which you'll see in the deleted montage. Because I really felt like you needed to explain that.
Yeah.
And of course, you forget this is Mission. I don't need to explain any of that. But we built this border location, and on the day we got there, it was sucked in with fog and stayed sucked in. So we actually ended up shooting a beautiful scene, and they were going to shoot this scene in the car for real.
And it would have just been all foggy.
Not only would it have been, yes, it would have been all foggy, but more importantly, all of this information changed.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the rules of Mission Impossible, whenever you have story to tell, when you have to explain stuff to the audience, do it in a phone booth. Do it in a car.
Yeah.
Do it in the smallest place possible, because you can be sure you're going to be rewriting it. You're going to be reshooting it. The audience is going to have questions you didn't even think of, and that's the only reason why they're doing this in a.
But it's very efficient. Again, here we are setting up the rules of engagement for the third act. So they're very carefully explaining to the audience they have to get this detonator, they have to get the key out of the detonator before they're allowed to cut the wires. So everything is clearly explained, so you understand the stakes and you can let the action play out, for the third act. And again, Ilsa reiterates it here. She's going, now, let me get this straight. So what you're saying is we have to do this, and then we have to do this, and then we have to do this. Mm-hmm. And then Benji goes, and now, so the audience is now completely clear on what they have to do in order to defuse the bombs. And then Ilsa's like, wait a second, this is impossible. You guys are crazy.
Is this what you do for a living? And this is all shaped up to the last minute on set. We listen to it, we play it back, we all discuss it. Tom has a very good ear for it, for what needs to be explained. And so he'll pick specific lines and say, that should be the last line of the scene. But we constantly move it around and reinvent it so that the information is coming across clearly. And it's one of the only scenes in the movie that is pure information.
Yeah, that's true.
It's that and the mission briefing at the beginning. Anything else where you're getting information, you're getting it through conflict, emotion, and it's 1 minute long, and it explains a ton of stuff. This is Reese Valley. The three houses in the closest to the camp are the only things real. Other than
the medical camp,
the medical camp is real. And these three houses right in the foreground back there, they're real. Everything beyond it is CG. And it's still a massive undertaking to bring everything out there and build it. The set was huge.
Yeah.
And 3 days before we shot here, I did not know what the scene was. I knew what the elements were, but the scene had not been written, and I hadn't figured out anything except for conversation that was going to happen between Michelle Monaghan and Tom. And these tents were in a completely different place 3 days before.
Yeah.
And we came down and picked the place where we knew Michelle would be standing and look most beautiful with the backlight and the depth behind her.
And look at the light. It's astonishing how the sun came out when we were filming this. And you had, I don't know, like 90 minutes or 2 hours to film this?
You had 5 hours of light every day.
Yeah.
And by the time we got to this place right here, we had about 90 minutes of light left looking in that direction. Mm-hmm. So, of course, you look at the number of angles I have looking in that direction. There are many, many, many camera angles, deceptively so, because what's happening is I'm over Tom's right shoulder whenever he's talking to Wes, and I'm over Tom's left shoulder whenever he's having a private moment with Michelle. So you had to shoot the scene twice. Once as the scene between. See, this is now a moment between the two of them. In a sense of a private conversation they're having.
Oh, that's a great moment when he goes, no,
and then,
I'm working.
I jump over to this side, and now it's a conversation involving all of them.
Yeah.
All of that meant, you're magnifying the number of camera angles you have. and it's all creating time pressure. And you see this beautiful sunlight that's happening. That's all going away in 90 minutes. So by the time I was able, and Tom, again, this as the star and the producer of the movie, looked at the sun and looked at the situation and said, this shot we can always get at Leavesden. Shoot them right now. What that ended up doing is it left Tom with only 8 minutes to shoot all of his coverage in the scene.
Yeah.
And he got it.
So everything nails it. He didn't just get it. He nails it. I mean, the performance is astonishing. The amount of detail and levels of subtext that is going on in his performance is just fantastic.
And all of this, you'll remember, it forced the way we edited the scene.
That's
because
true.
If you were on the wrong person during the wrong moment, it suddenly made it sound like when he's talking about the guardian angel, and we cut to Benji waving to Julia, it looked like Benji was the guardian angel they were talking about. Virtually every single moment in the scene is dictated by the storytelling elements within it. When we cut to Tom, when we cut to Wes, making sure that Michelle is in the shot, so that you're feeling her reactions all the time.
Props to Wes Bentley as well, because his performance is just fantastic. Like
he's so amazing.
He's so good, and he's like, wait a second, something's up here, but I don't know what it is, and I love my wife, and I trust my wife, so I'm going to go along with it, but it's great.
Yes, he's not just kind of some rube who doesn't realize what's going on.
Yeah. Another great music cue from Lorne here.
Oh, this is absolutely.
This was one of the hardest shots. I remember you telling me how hard this shot was.
Oh, it took 3 hours to get it.
Yeah,
and the poor actors are running through it every time. Just getting the crane to land in just the right spot. And
this used to be a longer scene between the two of them, but we just kept it down to the minimum of handing the.
Yes, and by the way, beautiful. The light on the porch of the house and everything was so amazing.
Yeah,
and this movie is comprised of so many beautiful shots that we simply we had no room for. It was an embarrassment of riches on this location.
And what we're doing here is we're saying to the audience that it's all going to kick off in a moment, and there's going to be 15 minutes before the end of the movie. So mentally, they're kind of like they're buckling themselves up for the final 15-minute roller coaster on the film, and we're just getting them primed for that.
And the arrangement of these trailers where Luther is very deliberate. One, it creates a corridor effect.
Yes.
There's a motif of corridors and tunnels running through the movie. But it's also something I could very easily bring back to Leavesden and reconstruct, knowing full well that scenes where you're building bombs, they require so many little pieces.
Yes.
You could spend years of valuable time. This is one of my favorite.
Oh, my word.
The music and image coming together in a way that is probably my favorite in the film. It's really, really powerful.
And now here we go. 15 minutes to go until the end of the movie.
And now you can see a lot of these shots. This is shot at, obviously in New Zealand, but the shot before it was shot in Leavesden months and months later.
There's a lot of, time cuts here to kind of speed through the action and get things going.
The more coverage you have of that car, the faster you can make it look.
Exactly.
It is not a fast car. This was shot months later at Leavesden, driving down the same hill where Tom crashes his helicopter.
That's true.
Because we realized we had cut that dialogue out.
Yeah, we needed
and never picked it up.
Yeah.
And so that and now we're back in New Zealand.
And here's a fantastic. So this is a great moment, and then here's an IMAX aspect ratio change. The other one's earlier in the film during the skydive, but now we're into IMAX mode, and you can see we're letting.
And I never noticed it. I never noticed it.
Oh, it's cool. I'm a nerd, so I noticed these things.
But when you pointed it out, it's the first time I've actually looked and watched it.
I love it. You pitched it to me. You said when he runs to the helicopter, that's when the IMAX is going to change.
And I never think about it.
Yeah.
We're in the midst of editing this scene or reviewing it or anything. I never think about the ratio change at all.
I remember when I watched Ghost Protocol at the IMAX, and I remember the IMAX ratio changed, and I thought, it would be cool to have one.
And here is another lovely double act.
Absolutely.
That comes of circumstance. And not knowing what the team was going to be doing in the days leading up to this scene.
And this line from Luther, where's the detonator? And then we cut the detonator. We added that to make sure that, keeping the audience aware of, what everyone's doing and where they are and the geography and who's got what and what Walker's doing.
And this was another sequence where we kept hearing.
But, Tommy's doing this for real. Can I just point out, I remember watching these dailies and he's got a safety harness on that we removed, but he is doing it for real.
Well, the safety harness is so that his body doesn't have to be recovered from the bushes. It's not going to help him if he breaks his neck.
That is true. Oh, my word. I remember.
Because he's really falling. They just let it go.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And now,
Michelle Monaghan.
We're in the stuff with Michelle, which is just great.
She's
For fans of the movie, for fans of the franchise, this is just great to see Michelle and Luther, because you know that there's some kind of connection with them. You know, I taught her, you know, she's a ghost.
Yes.
She's, you know, I taught her how to do this. And there's a moment at the end of Ghost Protocol where, you know that Luther's aware of what's going on. Oh, it's just so good.
We had a very limited time with Michelle Monaghan. We only had her for a few days because she was shooting The Path. She had to go back, and so all of the shots.
Tom is doing this for
Tom's
real.
doing it for real.
Just pointing it out.
And this was a reshoot.
Yeah, this was the second time, because it didn't look like he was climbing the rope, because it was.
No, it didn't pull back fast enough.
Yeah.
It was just there was
But
again,
my
a lot of
word,
air in the
it
shot.
was astonishing. I remember watching these dailies in New Zealand and just being. It's for real. It's astonishing, and again, great music playing through here.
Yes.
Thank you, Lorne.
Thank you, Lauren. Indeed.
What's amazing is that the cameras attached to the helicopter are so stable that they don't. It feels kind of unreal. So we've actually added this camera shake to.
But look at
give it
this.
a bit more
The
energy.
camera is panning. That's a head.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
It's
means
remote control.
It's being remote controlled from the ground.
Yeah.
You have to get the shot before the camera flies out of range.
Yeah.
So these shots where you actually see movement in the camera, Rob Hardy is operating that from a mile away.
Yeah.
And you're constantly hoping that Tom will get in the helicopter before we lose control of the head.
This is amazing stuff.
And by the way, a lot of this is stuff that can't be done safely. Everybody would be dead. And so of course it requires green screen on a buck shooting on the back lot. And it has to look like the real stuff that we've shot in New Zealand. Incredibly, incredibly difficult, painstaking work from the guys at DNEG to make this stuff look real. And I remember that shot. He looked at it and said, "No, that's real." And I said, "No, that he didn't do that. He'd be dead. He would have crashed."
Oh, and now we start this great chat between.
Yes, and all of this was shot months later.
Yeah,
when we found moments in the scene. But that was shot in New Zealand.
That's right.
And so it's really interesting to watch as what parts of the riddle actually work in the movie. And so you end up shooting lots and lots and lots of this stuff, knowing
you're finding the rhythms and the way it's going to intercut and the way that the combination of emotion and humor has got to be exactly right, and explaining that, if he's in another helicopter, how are you going to get it? So the audience is being...
And your choice to cut to Tom in his helicopter looking at the other helicopter.
Yes, exactly.
You chose a very specific moment. That's great
just
editing.
to sort of say,
to demonstrate
somehow Ethan Hunt is going to have to get from that helicopter into the helicopter in front to get that thing around Henry Cavill's neck. How is he going to do that?
Those trees are, by the way, they're real, but they're much lower. They're 50 feet below that ball.
Yeah.
And somehow the guys at DNEG managed to bring them up and make it all look real.
Yeah.
But there was no way you could safely do that.
But you did this for real. I remember watching this, and you've got this payload attached to this helicopter, and you're actually flying it above. I found that shot of Henry with the payload coming up behind. And it's just so elegant and great. And here we are again. All these inserts on the timers are all filmed months later when we know exactly what time to show on them, because we were playing around with parsing out the time of this sequence. It actually takes around, it's nearer 20 minutes than 15 minutes, but we hope that it doesn't feel like that because you're so invested. There's so much parallel action. This was done for real. No, it's just incredibly dangerous
and very hard to coordinate.
Very hard to coordinate with multiple helicopters, because
helicopters, and you just get the shot lined up, and then one helicopter or another has to leave for fuel.
Yeah,
that's very, very, very hard to do.
Yeah, this is really, you actually dropped that ball in the lake, though?
Not in that lake. Oh. That's a shot of us dropping it in another lake where we had a boat to recover it. It's such a remote lake.
Yeah. Oh, my word.
And it was originally going to be CG, and I begged Jake to please find me a way to do it so that it would be real. It was just never going to look right in CG.
This is awesome.
But so some of this, again, it's a mixture of real
Henry's really firing that gun as
Oh,
well.
yeah,
I mean,
he's
that,
really
that
firing.
gun is locked and loaded and firing.
That shot is amazing. The shot of the
all
lake.
this is I remember slowly painstaking that shot of Ethan flying. All this stuff of him doing this spin is completely real, and incredibly dangerous that he's that close to the rocks and he's spinning pretty much out of control of the helicopter.
And for every shot that you're seeing, there are 5 on the cutting room floor. 70 hours of footage. Much of it was just footage driving to work.
Yeah, exactly. Because you would start the camera, it would take off, so it would fly. So it would be 40-minute long takes where there would be like 20 minutes of good stuff.
Yes, and what ended up happening...
That was the shot that you did on the boat.
That's right.
Which is
my God, yes, we were on a jet boat.
I mean, look at this. Look at the way the sun moves and the traces, the beautiful traces from D-Neck. Oh.
Well, this was our big thing. We said going into the helicopter chase that what was going to make the chase work was the interactive light. That if you're shooting on a flat day, it was never going to feel real, even if it was real.
Yeah.
And that the more you could have rotating light going through the helicopter and flares and backlight. This was again shot months later because this shot took too long. And I said, if we had a close-up, we could make this feel tighter and give it more action.
Yeah.
And the beauty of those tents were they went everywhere and they just sat on the Leavesden back lot. And anytime we needed a little bit of information to tighten this scene up, we could go back. And that was one of the advantages of having Eddie there on set cutting while we were doing it. And Eddie is so fast at what he does and is so precise in what he does. What it is you're looking for.
Again, for real, he's flying through this look how narrow that canyon is. It is so dangerous what he's doing. And I remember holding my breath watching the footage going, how are they ever going to survive? The rotor blades are literally a foot away from the edge of the... And Tom is flying.
That was horrible. I've never been
Oh, my word. It's terrifying. Those days when you were filming, every day the helicopters landed and word got around the production that the helis had landed safely, we all were like, look at this shot. Oh,
amazing. Peter Wenham, our production designer, who we've not given a shout out to, he built these houses and built them. It's not just building the houses that have this great, authentic, lived-in look, but where he built them in relation to where the light would be. If you were lucky and there was sun out then, it's all stuff that is so unimaginable when you think about it. Because look at this, the reason this shot is as beautiful as it is because of the light.
Yeah.
And that is because where the house was built.
Yeah.
And with a knowledge of that, it's an incredibly precise skill. It did a great job. This is shot months later on the set in Leavesden,
and she's pregnant
now, and she's pregnant. This is earlier in her pregnancy.
Yeah.
We started shooting this scene. This shot took hours. I had
beautiful choreography. Look at that. There's Lane hiding there. Fantastic.
And this was originally a oneer. You remember that brought her in from the stairs.
Yes.
And I tend to get a little bit obsessive when I do those things, so I shot it about 14 times to get it right, and then we cut into it. But this was this is shot at Leavesden months and months and months later. We didn't know what this action was going to be when we shot the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So Rebecca has marks on her neck. Simon didn't have marks on his neck. And it was all stuff that we had to, and she's got a cut over one eye. The whole reason Sean backhands her is because she has to have the cut over over her right eye and not her left.
Exactly. I love this stuff with the clouds here. This was quite challenging editorially to build, to give us the sense that, they were above the clouds, and then Ethan comes out and he's now turned the tables and he's chasing after them. And then some of this stuff here is...
This was originally there was a much bigger sequence where Tom ended up on a road, and you saw it in the early trailers.
Oh yeah, that's true. On the first trailer.
On the first trailer. Where he almost hits a semi and has to go through these trees.
That's right.
And all of it was taking you off story. It was quite spectacular looking, but you didn't feel what you wanted was this. You wanted the drive.
Yeah.
And we ultimately, it was one of the things we cut.
It's always a challenge with this to make sure that you don't, you're giving the audience enough, but not too much, because they get fatigued quite quickly. So a lot of these helicopter sequences are very short. They're like, some of them are only 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah.
But they're full of dynamic, great shots. The more you intercut, the longer the sequence feels. And
That's
sometimes
right.
it's the opposite. Sometimes you let whole chunks of action play out and intercut less. Then the audience is given time to engage with it. But it depends on the movie. I've done it both ways in different films, but in this particular case, we ended up with quite large chunks of action. Although we did push the fight in the Kashmir house down quite a lot until quite late in Ethan's action. Eventually.
Yes. And what you had to do within the choreography was find ways. You built yourself opportunities to cut away more often than you might, just so you had that option, because the fight is so specific. And what really saved us.
Rebecca is so good in this scene. Look how committed she is.
Rebecca is unbelievable. They're all really great.
Yeah, I mean,
very hard and exhausting work.
Yeah.
And by the time we came back here, she was at this point 7 months pregnant, and a lot of this fight was shot on the very last day of shooting.
That's true.
It was late at night. We started late in the day because we'd been shooting nights just before this. So everyone was exhausted, and she's tied in that chair. She is 7 months pregnant, and was determined to do as much of her own action as she possibly could.
Yeah.
And this intercutting, we were constantly experimenting with how much was too much, how much was not enough.
Yeah.
And when did it feel like the action in the helicopter was related to the action on the ground? Because there were certain times, if you cut away to Ethan too much, it just felt like, well, what Ethan's doing is not affecting what they're doing. Simon, who we have not spoken about a whole lot in this commentary, is the secret weapon. He's so extraordinary. He's such a great storyteller, and what he's able to do and the emotions that he's able to convey are really incredible. So here's Rebecca. I mean, everything that she's doing is incredibly physically exhausting when you're not 7 months pregnant. Getting up and down off the floor like that is not the most comfortable thing.
Yeah, this used to be quite a bit longer, but we effectively managed to get to this crash moment a lot quicker and earlier. Yes. And people were like, well, how long is this helicopter on fire?
That was real, by the way. That shot of the two helicopters that close together, that was actually
that's the last thing. And then there's a lot of great double negative work here to show
all the things that couldn't. That's practical.
Yeah, I mean, Tom's really rolling around in a helicopter there, which is astonishing.
That shot before it was double negative, which I thought looked great. And again, by what helps you with these CG shots is filling it with so much information that your eye isn't just locking on anything for too long. Everything is done with specific storytelling.
So what we've done is we've got Ethan crashed. Now we can afford to spend time away from him. And now we're going to let the rest of the fight play out between these guys.
And that shot to the timer was originally to allow me to cut away.
Yeah, but again,
it ended up being
just a useful
quite the opposite
reminder of how much time is left.
And shooting up through the two of them to Benji.
Yeah, was incredibly effective. Very, very great idea. And then there's this terrific bit of choreography here where Benji's in trouble.
Yes.
And again, we accelerated this quite a lot. It used to be quite a bit longer,
Yeah.
But the music's playing and it's getting exciting
and you remember we
feel it when you're with a test audience, like when they want stuff to be.
Yeah. And we added the bottle later, dropping in that shot.
Yeah.
That's a digital bottle there.
But people understand. Now, interestingly, there are people in the audience who think that Benji might be dead because we've killed Alec Baldwin earlier in the film. There are people in the test screenings who said
that was the last shot of principal photography, by the way. That was that shot of Benji.
Oh, fantastic!
Up.
Okay,
this was shot, at midnight on the last possible day.
Yeah, and this is such a genius idea, having the helicopter roll down the hill. I remember when you first pitched this to me, I was like, if you can pull it off, it's going to be so much fun.
It's great visual effects work.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's fantastic. This idea that it's not over.
The Buck helicopter.
So good.
Oh, it's fun. And Henry and Tom are so good. They really sell it.
Yeah.
All of this, when I saw a previs, I thought, how are we ever going to... A previs is we do an animation of a sequence so everybody can understand what we're after. All of this was stuff I just thought, how are we ever going to do it?
It's very, very effective.
Henry's performance here, I find it so satisfying every time.
He was a trooper. He just had all that stuff sprayed in his face.
Yes. And the amount of physical punishment.
This stuff, they did for real at Leavesden. Ethan is falling through and grabbing Henry. It's astonishing.
And again, all with his broken foot.
Yeah.
This was all after his broken ankle, rather, all after his injury.
Yeah, all this stuff.
So when he's flailing around in there, we have to be very careful that he doesn't catch his ankle in anything.
Yeah.
All of that. That's him jumping off of a rostrum and just falling face first on that rock surface. This is Pulpit Rock in Norway.
So we've traveled geographically all the way from New Zealand to Norway, doubling as Kashmir. Yeah.
And we needed a mountain that Tom could fall off, not down. There's a very big distinction.
Yes.
Everything in New Zealand is a sloping mountain. There wasn't really a straight drop.
Yeah.
And I asked Ben Pills, our location coordinator, to find me something. He brought me a picture of Pulpit Rock. And I thought, that's where we're going. Now
go on.
This is 15 minutes to midnight. If we went past midnight, we went into another day.
Yeah.
Which was...
So the energy in the performances here, they're both exhausted. They've been filming all day, and this is the very last setup.
And the clock is literally running out.
Yeah.
And I'm shouting from off camera, and they're shouting back at me. Benji's like, let's just let me get a rhythm. Just stop talking. And I was like, I remember. You say the line right. You got to do this. We're yelling at each other. And of course, the whole time the clock is ticking away. And I had 3 cameras. One pointed at him, one pointed at her, and one between their feet pointed at Sean.
Yeah.
So I could shoot all of their coverage at the same time.
But what's great here is that, we've got them now in the background in the story. They're getting the bomb, and they're getting through to the fuse at the end. And so we can just allow this whole sequence to play out until Henry's death. And originally we were thinking we would intercut it more, but again, amazing music from Lord.
Great music. And an incredible the shots of green screen versus practical.
Yeah.
It goes from one shot to another, because when we were shooting at Pulpit Rock, there was only so much time. We couldn't shoot all the details of the sequence. We had to pick what shots were most important to shoot practically, knowing we would shoot the rest.
Exactly. I mean, you're like a shot like this coming up now, what
was most important. Yeah,
this one is obviously real.
And what was most important is that's rock. You couldn't have them fighting on it without risking injury. We built a set. We replicated the entire top of Pulpit Rock and padded it so that they wouldn't kill themselves when they were falling on the ground.
Yeah, this is a real shot. Oh, my word. Look at that. And then...
That's at the back lot.
Yeah.
And that's real.
And that's a real shot there. They're literally hanging off that rock.
Yeah,
real.
And everything was chosen by anything we could do here, we did do here.
Yeah.
And that created parameters for it.
I love this stuff. It's so epic.
And a lot of these hook shots we didn't get until very, very, very. These were pickups. These were things we didn't shoot them until months and months later. So 3 audiences watched this movie without any of the hook shots in it.
This is real. Here's some stuff that's real. That one there.
Yeah.
Tom just hanging. This is real.
That's real.
It's astonishing.
The one thing that isn't real is the helicopter, because there was no way we could haul the helicopter up there and hang it off the cliff. If there was, we would have done it. But all of that requires incredible work from Dine. And this shot was one of the last things Tom did.
Yeah. Months
later, we went back to get all of his close-up work on the rock, and immensely satisfying.
Good by Walker.
And it was so funny watching as that evolved, hearing the audience's reaction to each iterative.
Yeah.
And this is Tom's first day back at work after breaking his ankle.
Yeah.
And his right ankle is shattered 6 weeks prior, and he is climbing that mountain.
Yeah. And that's real. That is a real shot, and you see him doing it for real. And again, a wonderful music cue from Lorne we keep talking about the score, but it is just terrific.
But it's as important a part of editing as anything else.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Lauren really is the third man.
And now we're back with Benji and Ilsa with literally 5 minutes of filming left in the shoot day. And you've got all three, you're filming with 3 cameras simultaneously and you're just racing through. But the energy that gives their performance here, and that was shot months before in New Zealand with Ving, and then here they are.
And these little shots of the close-ups of the wires are shot in a box that we built, but months later. We feel like we need something closer, tighter, and so they built a box. All of these things had to be very carefully constructed.
Editorially, these sequences where you're doing countdowns are incredibly difficult to get the balance. And all this was like, wait, can we just get we're counting down. It's like, we're cutting on one. Yeah. Okay, stand by.
No rehearsal, no
rehearsal. They're so
actors working at their absolute peak.
Yeah, it's terrific. And then all those shots there get 1 frame shorter, so you're feeling like dun 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 dun. And then I remember I pitched this idea. No, you pitched me the idea of cutting to white and not seeing Ethan. And then I remember one of Lorne's pieces of music I found and I stuck it on there, and it just had this incredible effect. When we cut to white, everyone's just leaning in going, oh! The silence in the audience when you watch it, they're all going, what's happened? And then, of course, this wonderful piece of music here playing out.
I'd love to say it was some divine inspiration. It was an absolutely practical decision that the only way to really do it was to cut to white. Otherwise, you would just see it was there was no exciting way for Ethan to grab the thing and pull it out with his teeth.
Even though you filmed it, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I remember
it just wasn't exciting.
When you pitched that idea, I was like, wow, that is pretty ballsy. Not showing Ethan actually get the thing until afterwards, but it works like a charm. It's fantastic.
Well, I'll tell you where it was the very first time I saw it. It was your editing of it was brilliant. Look how lucky we got. The sun came out.
That's for real.
It was clouded in, and the sun just came out to match the shot we hadn't even created yet.
Yeah,
and we needed the sun in the shot, and we got it. We were so lucky.
Yeah.
But this music was music that Lauren had written before we'd shot a frame of film.
Yeah.
And you played it for me, and I said, it's beautiful, but I don't know where the hell that's going to go in our movie.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that in Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
And then I saw this cut together, and I had completely forgotten that we had heard the cue.
Yeah. We heard it in New York.
Before.
Do you remember we were working in New York and he had sent it to us after anyway.
And that shot of the Ethan's point of view, those shots were the quickest way we could transition into this. And what we did is put a remote head on a stretcher.
Yeah.
And so that you could move, that the camera could pan and tilt. And we just had the actors just carry the camera into a tent.
Yeah.
It was, again, something we did in one of the very last
Now, this
days.
was filmed. I remember coming to set to watch you film this, the very last scene in the movie, because I wanted to be there. And it was a freezing cold Saturday morning in the New Zealand winter. And everyone got there at 6 a.m. And then the sun rises, and then you're rolling camera the moment there's sun outside. Yes. Props to Wes Bentley. This line here where he says, "See you later." He goes, "See you later, Doc."
Like, and he does that
little wink.
And the fact that you can see it in a wide, in a profile, that you can track it.
And the audience totally get it, that basically he's fully aware of what's going on.
Yes.
And he's just like he's just playing along. It's brilliant.
And now oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to just, give enormous, huge props to Michelle for this scene, because she's...
Michelle and Tom.
They're both
so good. And again, talk about time pressure. The opening scene of the movie was shot the same day.
That's true.
An hour away by helicopter with that limited daylight. So we had to finish this by a specific time, run down and take photographs of the cast, because it was the only time they were all together.
That's true.
We had Vanessa Kirby there to put her in this scene in case we had to resolve her character another way. Mm-hmm. So everyone was there. Then we had to get in helicopters and fly to Milford Sound and shoot the opening scene in 1 hour.
Yeah.
So
the last scene in the movie and the first scene in the movie were filmed on the same day.
Were filmed on the same day, out of sequence. And with these performances from these actors, with all of this chaos going on around them, that there was no... Normally, you would shoot this in a tent at a studio.
Yeah.
And we only had Michelle for these days.
Yeah.
That we had, because you see this could easily be recreated anywhere. But what it lent to them, and now you get these shots, it lent it an authenticity, and it lent it an energy. And they're so good together, and it was a little bit of a reunion for them.
Oh, very much so. I remember when I put this scene together, just feeling the emotion and just feeling the end of the movie and how it was going to work.
But there was another scene.
There was another scene. Although I'm going to confess to you, in the back of my mind, when I saw that, and I remember thinking the movie could end here. A bit like I felt on Rogue Nation with the movie ending on Alec and Jeremy walking
that
out
was your
Senate
that was
room.
your
I
idea,
remember thinking,
and it was antithetical to everything we thought Mission was.
Yeah. But what this scene, this was
the end of the movie.
This was the end of the movie. This was a 4-minute coda that was shot at in Battersea Park in London by Albert Bridge. Again, a terrific scene. Everyone's here. Shot it over 2 nights, but
we never put it in the film.
We never put it in the film, but we discovered that audiences really wanted to resolve the White Widow
and
Lane. And we just did this in like 20 seconds. You wrote this great voiceover for
Angela's voiceover was what was in the scene.
It was in the scene, but you tweaked it a bit and we got it working.
I basically woke up in the middle of the night and went, what in the scene is important? And I was able to take about 30 seconds of information, and I suddenly realized as I was playing it in my head that these lines would be landing on these shots.
We need the IMF. We need people like you who care about the one life.
That's it. And I suddenly realized, my God, how did
you ever
show it
between
otherwise?
these two? Oh, it was so good. They were just playing all these moments beautifully. And then we do the music starts and we find ourselves in this kind of little team moment here.
And I asked you to extend the last shot of Tom.
Yeah, that's right.
And when he says, "Please don't make me laugh," and you extended it.
I extended it.
And I said, "Why did you cut when you did?"
Chris, we run out of footage. The camera rolled out like 1 second later. Watch.
And that's the camera running out.
That's the camera running out of film. So we didn't actually have any more. So he said, "Hey, leave the rollout, leave the flash and the rollout in the movie. It'll be great."
It's also quintessential Mission. It tells you everything
it's
about
like the camera rolled out literally 12 frames after he delivered
Tom
the line.
Cruise nails the last line of the film.
And
we run out of film.
Another beautiful, beautiful piece of work from Aaron and Seth at Filmograph.
Yeah, Filmograph
those guys just nailed it.
This is again another concept.
Incredibly difficult. Look at the detail in the backdrop of the notice board and the way the fuse moves and all the it's just beautiful work, guys. Well done.
Really well done, guys. You killed it.
Yeah.
Well, that went quickly. I hope the movie goes that quickly.
Yeah.
People watch it.
Yeah.
But that's I gotta say, this is the second film I've made with Eddie. I hope I hope there will be a third. I don't know
very
what you're
kind.
off to do now.
We'll see what happens.
But,
It's been a pleasure working on this. It's been it takes about a year and a half to edit a movie like this, and
in a little dark room.
But there were very unique challenges with this film, as there appear to be with all these movies. But because Tom broke his ankle, we had a 12-week hiatus, but the release date of the movie did not actually move. So we stayed with our July release date. And we ended up finishing filming at the end of February. And then we had our first friends and family screening about 4 days after the end, if you remember.
Yeah.
We were editing on a Thursday and we were screening on Thursday night, and we finished editing you had not actually watched the entire movie from beginning to end. I finished editing at 6:30 in the evening and we pressed play on the movie at 7:30.
Yes.
And that was the first time you had watched the movie. There's my assistant editors, by the way, guys. Massive props to all.
Music editor Cecile Torrance.
Cecile Torrance, he was fantastic. There's the sound team in there as well. Great guys. And so we had 4 days. You watched the movie with an audience for the first time, which is an incredibly scary thing to do. And there was only about half of the film had music. The rest of it was bare. And it was really long. It was like 2 hours and 50.
2 hours and 43.
2 hours and 43 minutes. Yeah.
And the first time we tested it for a test audience, not friends and family.
Yeah.
It was only we'd only cut 4 minutes out. It was 2:39.
Yeah, that's true.
And we could not imagine what else could come out of the movie. It was just like, it was that feeling you have when you put your foot in a trash can and you're just packing it down.
Yeah.
And Edgar Wright watched the movie.
That's
you remember,
true.
we had Edgar come and watch it, and Edgar said, "Yeah, the movie's all there. You just need to take 20 more minutes out."
Yeah.
And we thought, you're insane, Edgar. And sure enough, we cut 18 minutes out.
Yeah, we did.
He said he was that.
He nailed it. Yeah. And we did test screenings.
Thank you, Edgar.
We did test screenings every 2 weeks
Yes.
Basically, we did 4 tests and then we locked picture. So it was around about 9 weeks from the end of principal photography to when we locked.
To understand, for people who don't know, when you make a movie like this, you have what's called the director's cut, and that is the cut of the movie that's the first cut of the movie that the studio sees, that the producers see. The director has 10 weeks in the editing room to do his thing. We finished the movie. We finished editing the movie with 4 test screenings in 11 weeks.
I guess, yeah, it was pretty nuts, but
only because we'd had that time in the middle.
Exactly. And we could dial it in and focus. And everyone, when there's so little time in post-production, everyone has to be laser focused on getting to the finish line, and decisions get made quickly. And there's a lot of parallel processing. The sound team are working, the music's working, the visual effects are working. Everyone's going full tilt to get the film ready. And as we're recording this, we're still, putting the finishing touches to the movie, as I said, and we are, 10 days away from the premiere. Yeah.
We are always just about to cut the last wire, and we have 2 visual effect shots left.
Yeah.
So when you watch this movie and you're watching the halo jump, know that the 2 of us sitting here have not seen the finished film that you've just watched. We're still putting some finishing touches on it. And that was very similar to the last time.
Yeah.
The last movie, we finished it 5 days before the premiere. That's not because we're crazy Brinksmen and we enjoy that. That's just the nature of scheduling and release dates and things like that. And we like a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to everybody that's credited right here. But especially thank you to you, Eddie, because you put this whole thing together, and it was not an easy task. It's still not an easy task.
No, but it's a pleasure. It's a privilege to work on a film like this, and to contribute to the legacy of this franchise. And everyone working on the film on my team loves these movies and understands how dear they are to audiences around the world, and how much people enjoy watching these movies, and hopefully we'll be watching these movies for many years to come. And we all take that very seriously, and we're very, very passionate about the end result, and we want it to be great for everyone out there watching the film. And we really hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.